It is now 7 o'clock. I will call this meeting of the Urbana Committee, City of Urbana Committee of the Whole to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu?
Here.
Mr. Evans?
Here.
Ms. Hersey?
Here.
Ms. Colasetti?
Here.
Ms. Bishop?
Here.
Ms. Wilkin?
Here.
Mr. Quisenberry?
Here.
Mayor Marlin?
Here.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the previous meeting of November 18th.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mary Alice and seconded by Grace. Is there any discussion or corrections to the minutes? None. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, that passes. Are there any additions to the agenda? Yes, Mayor Moran.
I would request addition of a discussion of the draft alternative response task force request for proposal. This was sent out to council members on Friday.
Okay, and where would you like
And
that?
I
Like
would
in G?
add that under G number 2.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Next item is presentations and public input. We do not have any presentations this morning, and we'll begin with public input. You may approach the mic and have 5 minutes. Please begin with your name.
My name is Ruth Wyman. I'm a resident of Urbana and speak on behalf of the American Civil Liberties Union of Champaign County. Dear Mayor Marlin, members of the City Council, Wu, Hersey, Colasetti, Bishop Evans, Quisenberry, and Wilkins, and Police Chief Boone. We, the American Civil Liberties Union of Champaign County, write to support passage of the ordinance requiring City Council approval for police surveillance technology. Our ACLU chapter is a community organization representing approximately 1,200 households in Champaign County, a great many of whom live in Urbana. We work with the ACLU Illinois to protect civil rights and civil liberties in Champaign County. The ACLU maintains that legally enforceable safeguards, including robust transparency, oversight, and accountability measures, must be in place to protect civil rights and civil liberties before any surveillance technology is deployed. The decision regarding if and how police technologies should be funded, acquired, or used, and whether data from such technologies should be shared should not be made until meaningful input and public input has been solicited and given significant weight. The ordinance under discussion ensures that Urbana residents will have that opportunity. If a police technology is approved, data reporting measures must be adopted that empower the council and public to verify that mandated civil rights and civil liberties safeguards have been strictly adhered to. This is critically important because while police technology may threaten the privacy of all of us, surveillance efforts have been used throughout history to intimidate and oppress certain communities and groups more than others, including those that are defined by a common race, ethnicity, religion, national origin, income level, sexual orientation, or political perspective. Therefore, the ACLU of Champaign County strongly urges the Urbana City Council to pass this resolution. I would also like to add, just as a comment, this isn't an issue and should not be considered an either-or vote. It isn't safety versus civil liberties. This is about ensuring civil liberties of all of our residents and keeping everyone safe at the same time. Thank you.
Hello, council members. My name is Euphoria Rising, and I am a resident of Urbana Ward 3. I am testifying today in enthusiastic support of Ordinance Number 24-12-042 regarding police surveillance technology and databases. My sincerest thank you goes out to Alderpersons Wilkin and Colasetti for putting together a robust and community-centered proposal establishing approval and reporting requirements for the procurement of certain surveillance technologies. I also want to acknowledge the years of work and discussion among the City Council and the public leading up to this moment. I recognize that the present proposal comes out of larger nationwide debates about policing following Trump's anti-immigration policies, as well as the 2020 murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, where I am currently pursuing doctoral studies. As folks here have or will later testify, council oversight on surveillance technologies will also help to combat Islamophobia in policy and practice, as Muslims have endured decades of unjust surveillance in the U.S., especially following 9/11. There are key points of the proposal that I want to specifically address. First, I commend the attention given to protecting the rights of people seeking out-of-state abortions in Illinois, asylum seekers, individuals and organizations engaging in peaceful protest, and people whose protected demographics place them under potential for additional surveillance. This clause of the ordinance is important given the upcoming Trump administration, which has had an obvious and destructive track record of anti-immigrant, Islamophobic, and racist policies. But it also recognizes that policing has always been a reproductive rights issue, that policing has always been an immigrants' rights issue, and that policing has always been a race and gender issue. Secondly, the proposal recognizes that indiscriminate use of surveillance technologies creates disparate impact among marginalized and politically active communities, and I use disparate impacts very specifically here. It should be noted that many police surveillance technologies, including AI-driven facial recognition, were first developed for and are used in the repression of Palestinians living under apartheid and genocidal conditions. As a city, we must recognize that harm is probable with surveillance technologies, even with lawful use. The council approval and reporting process, as it is presented in the proposal, will help to recognize the potential for surveillance technologies to harm vulnerable populations and ensure steps are taken to mitigate harm. Finally, the proposal gives attention to civil rights and civil liberties under the 1st, 4th, and 14th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. This is important. While it is incumbent that every American knows the rights and liberties afforded to them under the Constitution, the average resident is ill-prepared to apply the Constitution to real-life police interactions, and perhaps rightfully so. The emergence of new technologies, including AI-driven facial recognition, corresponds with a relatively new territory of legal and popular debate around the constitutional use of surveillance and policing. The proposed approval and reporting requirements for surveillance technology will facilitate an open and transparent conversation about how the city will protect the civil rights and liberties of its residents, which otherwise would have taken place over years of costly court proceedings. Again, I thank Alderpersons Wilkin and Colasetti for their work on the proposal, and I urge the council to move it forward to a full vote. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Bram Osterhout, and I'm a resident of Urbana. I'm also here to speak in support of Ordinance 2024-12-042. I really welcome this measure towards democratic oversight of our police force. I believe very strongly that our police force, both in its actions and in its procurement of equipment, should be subject to very strict democratic control. This is especially the case in the case of surveillance technology. Digital surveillance technology, of course, presents additional dangers beyond how it might be misused within the community, because once that data is created, it's virtually impossible to ensure that it's going to be kept in the hands that it was meant to be, and that's a particular concern in these times when we have a federal government that is openly hostile towards many members of our community. So I really am glad to see that the City Council is taking this step towards giving us more control over our own city's police force, and I hope that the City Council will pass this ordinance and pass more such ordinances in the future that extend the democratic control over the functions of city government. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mark Medlin. Last week, there was a letter to the column that was written by, in his words, Mr. Idiot.
Can you use the mic, please? Thank you.
Mr. Idiot Council Doofus. In it, he chastised the Urbana Police Department for daring to wear their uniforms at a Shop for the Cop event. These men and women donated their own time, their own money, to make sure that those less fortunate in this community received Christmas gifts. And what was the complaint? That they looked too militaristic. No thanks to the officers for spending their own time to go, but rather he wants this council, which, as I read, the city of Urbana is having, as every city does, has budget problems, where he wants to invest over $100,000 in uniforms that would be worn maybe once a year. The cost of a soft uniform is astronomical. But he talks about the fact that they're wearing bulletproof vests. That's what police officers do. There was an officer killed last night in Florida that was murdered in the line of duty. But let's talk about what's on those vests. Today there was a shooting up in Wisconsin. The first officers on the scene, before fire and ambulance got there, the first officers on the scene took their tourniquets that are on those vests and went in and administered aid to those people that need it. The council member has zero idea what law enforcement does in emergency situations. Fire often says on the radio, we'll stage until the scene is secure. And as a result, valuable minutes are lost as the fire department is making sure that they're not walking into a gunfire while those officers are going into that gunfire and dealing with emergency responses, putting on tourniquets. Every day, every time there's a shooting in town, read about what it says in the press release, that officers administered emergency first aid along with the fire department. That means putting on compression bandages, tourniquets, etc. The council member also wrote, erroneously, that, well, I shouldn't say erroneously, he chastised former chief of police from Champaign, Anthony Cobb, for wearing a uniform at a public event while praising Troy Daniels for not wearing a uniform. I have lunch with Troy about once a month. Guess what Troy wears every morning at 9 o'clock as his Parkland chief of police? He wears a uniform. Does that mean that he's wrong now for wearing a uniform in public? The council member also mentions a retired officer and the fact that he wasn't carrying a gun in open. The council member is well versed in the laws in Illinois of open carry. You cannot do it, even as a retired officer. You cannot open carry. So I'm confused. Where is the respect that the men and women of law enforcement get from this council member? I often have, once a year, Chief Boone comes and speaks to my class at Parkland. I've had Urbana investigators come, and I've got an Urbana patrol officer coming next month. The one thing the kids look forward to is wearing the uniform. They get to explain the vest, the equipment that they carry, and other things. Just showing up in a suit and tie really doesn't cut it. Getting to see the doodads they put on the uniform does. And as I close out my remarks, my Christmas gift this year, Mr. Evans, is that you appear on WDWS, as I have for the last 3 years asked you to do it. Brian Barnhart claims that you two are very good friends, so I expect to hear from you on the radio where we can have comments from you as to why you are such an anti-police advocate. Thank you. Have a great Christmas.
Good evening, I'm Brian Dolliner. Oh, I used to like sitting in that table so much, but thank you for hearing this ordinance tonight. I'm here to speak on the police spying ordinance, as I would characterize it. But first I want to, just because we get characterized as being anti-police, I want to say something nice, which is that I spoke on the phone with Chief Boone last week about potential ICE arrests and raids in town. We had worked on this in 2018, and we had a good conversation, and Chief Boone seems very open to communication and trying to address what might come around the corner here. And Chief Boone also showed up for the Immigration Forum last week, so we're happy to see his participation. I'm a community journalist. I write about police surveillance. I wrote in 2012 an article. I exposed Sheriff then Walsh. I was operating a drone at the time. Nobody else in town knew about it. And again, in 2014, I wrote a story exposing for the first time the MRAP, a large truck fresh from Afghanistan and Iraq, which was acquired by the sheriff's office. So I'm still concerned about these issues. I wrote an article about the mob action charges, the felony mob action charges against 9 activists. One of those cases has been pleaded out, and as I understand, and so I've been able to obtain the police reports on all the 9 cases. And just going through the cases, I just wanted to share a few things which justify our concerns of why we're all here tonight. Again, this was for the encampment on April 26th on campus. What was happening, hundreds of campuses across the country were setting up these encampments, nonviolent, peaceful encampments, really performative in nature, illustrating the displacement of Palestinian people through these tent encampments. And for just putting up a camping tent, a lot of police showed up. And there was a massive crackdown. This was, in reading through the police reports, we see various degrees of high-level and low-level surveillance that are already taking place. Now, this is something that's been developing since 9/11 and anti-so-called terrorism laws and disbursement of federal and state and local funds. And further sort of information sharing between Urbana, Champaign, UIPD, the Sheriff's Office, Rantoul, Parkland College, and the development of what's to come, a real-time crime center, nearly $1 million spent and attained by Nikki Budzinski. So in looking through some of the police reports, we find that things like UIPD Detective Al Sakri reached out to the Illinois State Police Statewide Terrorism Intelligence Center, STIC for short, to identify one activist with state IDs, ran them through facial recognition software to match them in pressing the charges. They used state IDs, driver's license with others. In one case of an activist, a California driver's license was used. Student IDs, iCards were used. Parkland IDs were used. Of course, social media was used. In one case, a Parkland art student won an art award, and that was used to press charges against one of the activists. Furthermore, the controversial license plate readers were used. Flock license plate reader was used to identify a Subaru Impreza at University and Wright and Green and Gregory. In another case, Milestone video cameras were used and linked up then with Flock license plate reader to identify a Toyota Avalon. And these as well, this also includes low tech in the case of video footage from Urbana City Council meetings, which were used to frame charges against local activists. So now I have to think about, I come and give a public presentation here, is this going to be used in some kind of future police charge against me and put me on court, matching my identity here with some police body camera footage that's being put on some cloud and ran through some state STIC technology and used to put charges in against me and put me in jail. So I appreciate y'all taking initiative on this issue.
Good evening, Council. My name is Tony Allegretti. I'm a Ward 1 resident. I'm speaking for myself, no one else, though I echo everyone who has already spoken, or at least almost everyone. This council should exercise its power as a legislative body in this city and ensure transparency and oversight regarding the police technology. This is a simple, small d democratic form of government. Checks and balances hold the executive to power. Ask the questions about what they're asking to do and fund. These technologies, if left unchecked, will provide, or will without sufficient oversight, will allow for dragnet surveillance. We've heard this evening already how this is occurring already in the community. They don't need probable cause, they don't need reasonable suspicion, they don't even need a hunch. These technologies will be used without any of those things, and sometimes we won't know if they're even occurring. These target people in sensitive places, healthcare centers, immigration clinics, gun shops, union halls, at protests, at religious places of worship. They collect information from people unknowingly and unwittingly in a car or if someone has their cell phone. It tracks them even if they've had no involvement in crime or unrelated to any sort of investigation. This data can be hacked. There are many instances of this happening, even when I'm sure the company assures you it's safe. The longer the storage of data, the more serious the breach. This data can be shared. Federal authorities, other state authorities, it can be shared for profit, not to the benefit of the city. It can be abused. Someone with access can track a spouse or a partner. It can result in the wrongful search or seizure of someone based on bad data. This leads to lawsuits, large payouts to cities. This has happened in the past. The data is not always accurate. One study showed that 1 out of 10 plates is misread by an ALPR system. So all we're asking is have the city ask these questions. Who are we getting into bed with? Who is this company? Who do they have ties with? Military contractors, weapons manufacturers, other countries? This ordinance doesn't prohibit any of these surveillance technologies. It doesn't tie the hands of the department. It just requires them to justify their requests. And if all of this tech is so important and crucial, well, it should be very easy for them to justify. So let's provide a framework for its use or prevent it and prevent its abuse, especially when this technology can intimately track people and their physical movements in person or online. Let's allow the public to voice its concerns, its critiques, or its support. Allow the public to know how they're being tracked and surveilled, and require the city to continue the justified use of these technologies if they're abused. In my skimming of the Code of Ordinances, I noticed a number of things that the council is required to approve. They're required to approve a storm drain outside of corporate limits to connect. They're required to establish parking meter zones in the city. They're required the council is required to prohibit certain weight classes of vehicles from traveling on a city street. They should be able to approve the use of these types of technologies. Thank you.
Hi, thanks very much. I'm Sam Ellinger. I am an Urbana citizen. I also used to write about technology as a journalist, so I'm coming a little bit with that perspective. I don't want to repeat too much what people have already said tonight, but I want to voice also my enthusiastic support for this ordinance. A lot of government technology projects, put quite simply, a lot of them fail. And a lot of them fail because there was not proper oversight of them. There was not proper discussion about them. Government gets engaged in technology projects, and I think, like a previous person said, they don't know who they're getting into bed with. They get really bogged down in an extremely expensive project that doesn't do what they thought it was going to be able to do, or it does something really bad and really dangerous for people. I think it's really important to recognize that we're quite a small town, and that makes data protection a difficult challenge for us. Like, our buying power at being a smaller city is not as big as some of these larger cities who are able to procure larger cyber solutions to protect data. So you also need to recognize that, like, procuring these types of technologies is extremely risky for the town, because you're going to be collecting a lot of data that you can't protect, and that will be extremely expensive to protect. And so I would just urge, like, I think this is just some really common sense, like, city government legislation. I think it's really smart. Like everybody said previous to me, it's not prohibiting anything. It's saying that we need to have, like, really responsible discussions about it and what it means for people. I think we had previous discussions about increasing the police budget, and a lot of people came out here and said we need to talk more before we just increase the police budget. I think a lot of people came out and expressed their concern for the police budget being increased without more discussion. And so to me, this sounds like a good way to be sure that there's, like, good discussion happening around the way the police are using their budget. So to me, this seems quite common sense, and I am really enthusiastically supporting it. So thank you very much.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I am Bill Colebrook, a resident of Ward 6, and along with my wife, own a business downtown in Ward 2. I am also a candidate for alderman in Ward 6. My comment tonight is in regards to the proposed ordinance for policing technologies. I have over 35 years' experience in law enforcement. I know what good law enforcement looks like, and more importantly, I know what bad law enforcement looks like. The Urbana Police Department is one of the best police agencies you can find. We should feel blessed for having the police department that we do. This ordinance strikes me as an attempt to restrict the daily operations of our police department. It is micromanagement by the council of a city department. I believe it is overreach and exceeds the authority of council. I'm not the only one that feels that way. I've had multiple conversations with residents that are deeply concerned that this ordinance, if passed in its current form, will hinder current and future investigations, jeopardize the safety of our police officers, and make our city less safe. From the input I have received, this does not represent the wishes of Ward 6 and the city. Transparency and accountability should be demanded of all of our city departments, most of all the police department. But this is not the proper vehicle for that. It has not had any review by the corporate counsel, police chief, or city staff. Competent government requires input from experts and the effective staff in order to make good legislation. The very broad definitions of the targeted technology and databases would include established, time-tested technologies that literally every police department in Illinois, if not the nation, already uses. Databases that contain driver's license, vehicle registration, gang databases, dash cam, body-worn cameras, and the state police and FBI, NCIC fingerprint and wanted files, among others. If the council does not retroactively give their blessing on these technologies, it would be devastating to the health and safety of our officers and residents of the city. As part of the justification for this ordinance, the 10 shared principles were cited. It is true, transparency is an important pillar of the 10 shared principles. I can assure you an ordinance of this nature was not the intent of the NAACP or the Illinois Chiefs of Police. The reason I know this is because I was honored to have participated in the police and community roundtables that actually created the 10 shared principles. I was in the room. I was at the table. This ordinance is not in the spirit of the 10 shared principles. It is stated in the ordinance that it is needed to deter the police from apprehending out-of-state abortion seekers in their quest to obtain reproductive health care, and that federal law enforcement will access data collected locally. My question back to you, Council, says who? These are outlandish statements not based in fact. Also stated is the need to protect residents without legal immigration status. There is already an Illinois law for this. It's called the Trust Act. It specifically prevents Illinois cops from assisting ICE with issues that only relate to immigration status. In addition, a stated need is to prevent law enforcement from apprehending citizens exercising their right to free speech. The First Amendment allows for these activities. The officers on the police department swear an oath to uphold the provisions of the Constitution. These justifications are not rooted in fact and only serve to misinform and scare your constituents. In addition, to assert that there will be no fiscal impact is incorrect. Staff time alone has a financial impact. Lastly, 17 sources are listed that apparently generated the guiding principles. However, there are no citations. The reader has no idea which source was used to generate any given guiding principle. Any professor will tell you, show me your work. Let the reader access the same material to challenge your affirmations. This is a bad proposal based on flawed assumptions. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's good. Okay. Hi, City Council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Bhavna Beam, and I have attended and spoken at City Council meetings before. I'm a second-year computer science PhD student here at U of I. My research focuses on governance and policy around AI and community-centered data practices. I tackle extremely hard questions around AI fairness and ethics. In the simplest terms, I ask the question, how do we protect our civil liberties in this age of AI and extremely heightened surveillance? I don't want to spend my time discussing all the harms of AI technologies. There are privacy issues, security issues, bias and fairness issues. In fact, 5 minutes wouldn't even come close to being enough time to discuss all the harms. Also, on the other side, 5 minutes would not be enough to also discuss all the incredible ways people across the nation and the world have organized against these technologies. And I think what we're seeing today in this room is a great example. I want to stick to what I know and what I spend most of my time researching, and I want to make a few points that would hopefully help you guys guide your decision on this ordinance. First, technology, left unchecked, can and will almost inevitably cause real harm to the members of our community. As a computer scientist myself, I can say that ethical, fairness, and value checks around AI are scarce to non-existent in industry practices. And in fact, most of computer science and technology is controlled by profit-making businesses that care more about the money that's in their pocket than the effect and harm their technology has on the public. Second, technology is quite powerful and transformative. I wouldn't be in this field if I didn't believe so, and I don't want us to overlook that. But it tends to only have its transformative power when it's controlled and shaped by the communities it affects. For example, in Mexico, a group of women started collecting data about missing persons, specifically the locations of the last known appearance of these people. And this has happened around the country. This data has been extremely effective in reuniting families and helping people understand their rights. The most powerful aspect of this story is that the data is owned and controlled by the people, specifically by the families of these victims. Thus, it speaks to my point time and time again, which I find in my research, that democratic control of data and technology is imperative to protect the rights of civilians. Finally, this ordinance addresses the first 2 points I've made. This ordinance is not trying to ban the use of technology. It is merely asking that the public, the community, has input on what the technology can be used for and for what purposes. And this Urbana-Champaign community is well equipped, as you can see here today in this room. We have researchers, community organizers, advocacy groups willing to help make those decisions in the future. Your vote is just allowing us that chance to have our input. From my experience as a CS ethics researcher, community-centered practices are the greatest tool we have to fight against the harms of technology. So I urge this council to please be an example for other towns and cities across the country. So I would recommend the council to vote yes on Ordinance 42. Thank you.
Notice that there's a lot of applause for the people who support this. My name is Karen Medina. I live in Champaign, but I have been a peace demonstrator in Champaign-Urbana for decades. In April 2024, the police of Urbana, along with the police of Champaign, University of Illinois, and Champaign County, misused their surveillance toys to stomp all over the First Amendment rights of peace demonstrators. The resulting felony charges destroyed livelihoods. Some people were fired from their jobs. Illinois law explicitly bars police surveillance technologies from being used to monitor, and I quote, any political protest, march, demonstration, or other assembly protected by the First Amendment. Urbana police proved again that they cannot be trusted with the toys that the city buys them. The police misuse their expensive toys. They ignore Illinois laws and their own policies, and they will not limit their use of their toys. If the police broke all sorts of rules with hundreds of people watching in April of 2024, what are they doing when there's nobody watching? Instead of defending the constitutional rights of residents, the Urbana police violated our constitutional rights. We demand that there be oversight on how the Urbana police use their technology tools, I'll call them toys, even if it's for 5 years rather than forever, just until Trump is out of office, plus a year to readjust. And this is because Urbana is a community that has said that they want to be a sanctuary city. We do not trust the Urbana police force to stand firm as a sanctuary city. We have a lot of immigrants here. They make up a lot of the workforce in and around Urbana. In our restaurants, as landscapers, as roofers, the people who clean offices, the people who help us put food on the table by working in the farms and food processing. April 2024 proved that we cannot trust the Urbana police. They need some oversight on how they use their tools. As my husband Stuart mentions in an email that should be read, retention and disclosure of the acquired data is also important. There needs to be a limited, brief retention period for the data collected, after which all data will be deleted. The city must get binding commitments that the vendors of the toys cannot use the data in other ways beyond the city's control. City policies should set a high bar on when surveillance tech may be acquired and under what circumstances its use can be permitted. I would add, additional reporting requirements needs to be fine-tuned. Use and prohibition needs to be fine-tuned. I believe that the City Council oversight for 5 years will help fine-tune the use and prohibition and the reporting. Thank you.
My name is Mark Enslin. I live in Ward 4. I am well represented by this ordinance 12042. One incident of a very light nature that affects how I think about this is that a friend of mine who lives in Urbana got a fine from Florida for not paying a toll fee. And this notice had a picture of a car with a license plate, and there was the number of her license plate number, and it was very puzzling because none of us could remember going to Florida. And it took thinking that, oh, numbers actually repeated from state to state, to question this technology. Again, it was a very light example. We wrote to them and it got corrected, but it's one sign of how tricky controlling and working with technology can be. I am in favor of public servants getting the resources they need to serve the public. My favorite public servants are ones that seek oversight and involvement of the public, both directly and through elected council members and in other means, to make sure that they are actually serving the public. Surveillance technology is developing at a mind-boggling rate around the world, and the consequences and features of what happens when people try to use it are also mind-boggling. It's tempting to think that good guys getting the strongest technology will be good for everybody, and unfortunately, a lot of abuses are done by good guys, intentionally and unintentionally. And so this ordinance is one step towards making sure that those technologies that we as a community are choosing to make use of are actually serving us. So I would think that anyone who is considering them would welcome this oversight. So thank you very much. I support this legislation.
Hi, I'm Anita Chan. I'm an associate professor at the School of Information Sciences and College of Media, a former Fiddler Innovation Fellow at the National Center for Supercomputing Applications, and the director of the Community Data Clinic at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I'm also currently a faculty affiliate at the Data and Society Research Institute. In all of these capacities, I work in researching the social impacts of contemporary data-driven technologies, and I speak today in support of Ordinance 12042. I think of it as a common sense approach. I'll be reading from a letter that I sent to the council, and I'll only read 3 paragraphs of it for interest of time. The ordinance is a common sense approach to promoting transparency and protecting civil liberties, civil rights, and due process, while also balancing the police and larger public's safety interests with respect to new surveillance technologies. In many cities, decisions to acquire and use powerful new surveillance systems such as these have been made by police departments non-transparently, without any knowledge or input from the public or their elected officials. This circumvents due process, a principle which, amongst other things, requires government to provide advance notice before taking action that could deprive individuals of basic rights and liberties. The complexity of new surveillance systems and the nature of their technological components to dynamically change and evolve further make them obvious liabilities for public transparency and advance notice. This in turn heightens potential for their abuse by bad or unaccountable actors. This ordinance is a common sense approach to preventing such abuses and to reaffirming the city of Urbana's commitment to good governance and accountability principles. Research has demonstrated that when used indiscriminately, surveillance technologies and systems can create oppressive, stigmatizing environments for residents, especially those from historically marginalized communities who have been disproportionately targeted by their use. For this reason, dozens of jurisdictions across the nation have firstly either banned specific surveillance technologies, Dayton, Ohio, for instance, against automated license plate readers, and or have required city council approval for their acquisition. And this includes examples from Madison, Wisconsin, to Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Detroit, Grand Rapids, San Francisco, Boston, New York, San Jose, a whole host of different municipalities of various sizes. And secondly, have defined procedures for basic due process that at minimum comply with the public's right to know. I'll just skip to the very end here where I write, finally, it should be noted that it's not unthinkable to imagine that data collected on targeted individuals by public agencies with the initial intent to promote safety and health could be repurposed for malicious and discriminatory use. We have national laws in force today to limit the sharing of individuals' health data and educational data with this in mind. Many universities, including the U of I, refuse to keep records on such data points as which students have DACA status to prevent undue risk to students and to the educational environment writ large. In recent years, dozens of US cities have passed laws to prevent facial recognition data capture after 2019 reports revealed that hundreds of millions of driver's license photos were stored in states' DMV databases and were being used by ICE to search for immigrants of interest. At the height of the U.S. eugenics and anti-immigration movement in the early 20th century, U.S. eugenicists also leveraged data that they had collected from monitoring the so-called unfit to pass laws in more than 30 U.S. states that legalized the forced sterilization of the unfit, meaning the poor, the disabled, minorities, and disproportionately Black and Brown and Indigenous populations, in the name of public health and safety. Ordinance 12042 is a common sense approach to preventing such abuses. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Stephen McGuire. I am a resident of Urbana. I can't make points that were more eloquent than those before me, but I can say that I am totally in support of Ordinance 12042. When thinking about this, I think that two large checks to abuse of power are democratic norms and legal checks and balances. At times when we have authority figures that are willing to stand by the law and not attempt to monkey with it, so to speak, democratic norms may be enough. However, the Trump government has made clear that it will target its political enemies. It has made clear its hatred of the LGBT community. It has made clear that it wishes to target immigrant communities, and not only illegal immigrants, but legal immigrants as well. A gentleman before me, well, as such, we need as many legal checks and balances as possible, because the current authorities we have now, not just yourselves, but on a higher level, will not respect democratic norms and democratic norms alone, and oftentimes will not respect the law, and therefore we need mechanisms to hold them accountable. A gentleman before me said when it was mentioned that individuals seeking reproductive health care might be targeted, or that immigrants might be targeted, his response was, I believe, says who. I should cite for that individual that at an earlier point, a law enforcement official, I believe it was in Austin, Texas. If someone finds out it was different, please correct me on the record. But this individual was asked for from the DMV, because oftentimes there would be a name change that would occur there, the names and addresses of transgender individuals, saying that, well, they just needed such a list. When this was found to be naturally alarming, and people reached out from the public and from the press asking, why do you need such a list? Months after this was asked for, they could not provide an explanation of why they needed such a list. Another incident was in Michigan. A sheriff wanted to keep information on people who had Harris Waltz signs in their yard. That should be distinctly alarming. The police are vested with the authority of the state in order to protect us. But who guards the guards themselves? If we do not have people who will respect the democratic norms of our country, those guards may not guard themselves. And as such, we need to provide as much of an apparatus legally so that they are compelled to do so if they have any mind to do so of their own, and so that if they do not, they are held accountable. This ordinance provides that necessary legal check and balance to restrict any wrongful use of surveillance technology. And I should also point out, a gentleman earlier argued that, well, So many law enforcement agencies are already using this technology. Well, if they need it, they can justify it before City Council. Simply because so many cities are already doing this is not justification in and of itself that it needs to be done or that it should have been done. Thank you.
Paul Muth. I'm on the boundary of Ward 1 and 2, I guess. That's where I live anyway. I second the idea, third, that some really eloquent, persuasive arguments been made. I don't need to be persuaded. I already think this is really just good government to have this kind of oversight. But the idea of using the NAACP's and the police chief's shared principles is pretty ludicrous. I did just read those, and they have nothing to do. They emphasize community policing and diversity in hiring, things like that. There's nothing about introducing new technologies such as this. In Chicago, they got sold a bill of goods. I forget who was, I guess it was Lightfoot, who was no enemy of the police, as we know. The shot spotting technology. These are really slick presentations that they give, and this is to locate guns fired. It didn't work. It didn't work. It's ludicrous. Do they have it in Champaign? Yes. Oh. The NAACP was right there with in the New York branch, and the New York ACLU was right there against license plate technologies, because they know how many mistakes can be made and how it can be used in other words. Some of these license plates, readers actually take pictures too, apparently, and building up a dossier of images of possible perps. So the only specific question I have is I found some local community researcher has found the name Cellebrite, and that's an Israeli firm that does some kind of surveillance technology. I can't find anything in the Urbana records about it other than a nearly $4,000 expenditure in 2019. I'd like to know what that technology was and whether it's still being used. And if we had an ordinance like this, I wouldn't be asking that question because it would already be in the record. So I'll surrender the mic and give it over to Saul.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Soteropoulos, and I'm a resident of Champaign-Urbana. I'm an activist and a community organizer for liberation. I support the ordinance that places checks and balances on surveillance technology by the Urbana Police Department. Our country is descending farther into fascism. Our country has been a surveillance state for decades, especially for Black people and other people of color. The surveillance of American citizens and residents markedly increased after 9/11, and we all know that this surveillance didn't ever return to pre-9/11 levels. In fact, it's increasing right now. Once unchecked surveillance is approved, it is very hard to roll it back. That's why we are all here asking you to join us in fighting back. We live in a country where we have constitutionally guaranteed protections from unnecessary searches and seizures. We have the right to move about, to go to school, work, be with our friends and neighbors without being tracked, especially without any kind of oversight. The residents and visitors of Urbana have the right to know how their data is being tracked and stored. This ordinance is reflective of what people want. That's what makes it democratic. Officers swear an oath to protect the Constitution and serve people, but as numerous people have said tonight, there are countless examples of cops collecting information unethically or illegally and using this information against people who have protested, sought out reproductive health care like abortions, lived in this country without documentation, or who are homeless. We deserve to live in safety with all of our needs met. We, the working class whose labor runs this community and whose tax dollars fund it, demand transparency in surveillance technology and policing. And just like you all unanimously approved the ceasefire resolution in March, we are asking you to unanimously approve this ordinance tonight. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sana Sabuwala. I'm a resident of Ward 2, and I'm a member of Champaign-Urbana Muslim Action Committee. I'm here to voice my support as well as Muslim Action Committee's support for the police surveillance ordinance that was put forward tonight. As was just mentioned, the Muslim community has faced ongoing issues with over-surveillance in the name of counterterrorism since 9/11. It's a problem that deeply affects our community psychologically as well as practically. We really appreciate the council considering taking steps at the local level to prevent us as a city from over-surveillance. In 2021, PBS did an excellent report regarding the impacts of over-surveillance and the ways institutions have started to use more advanced methods to surveil smaller and smaller groups over time. Although government reports continue to show that white supremacist groups are the largest domestic terrorism threats, government surveillance is most often mobilized against Black and brown people. This ordinance gives us a layer of protection against that. In talking about police in Urbana, especially when we're talking about the police budget, we talked a lot about accountability. This ordinance is a really great example of an accountability measure. This is not an anti-police measure. It's a police accountability ordinance. It requires transparency. With this ordinance, the public can see where the police department money is going and what kind of information the police can gather. This transparency allows us as a community to keep the police accountable. The Alternatives to Policing Task Force was created because we trust our community to know and understand how to keep us safe. This council already passed that measure, so I think it's something we generally agree on. I know I have learned a lot from coming to City Council and listening to public input, and allowing space for that information sharing about surveillance technology is just as important as allowing council oversight. So this ordinance would do both of those things. Just like with the Alternative to Policing Task Force, we're asking the council to trust Urbana residents as local experts. Urbana is unique because we get to hear from people who are academic experts as well as residents with lived experience locally, and this ordinance would provide more space for that. CUMAC also supports this measure as it will allow the public to see when the city invests in foreign surveillance technology. Specifically, we care about not investing in Israeli surveillance technology like Cellebrite. And we can, whoever spoke earlier, we can check out our numbers, but when I looked at Urbana's finances, we saw almost $10,000 spent since 2018 on Cellebrite digital forensics technology, which is an Israeli company that has been accused of knowingly providing technology to corrupt regimes to target journalists, activists, and LGBTQ people around the world, basically legally hacking into phones to get digital footprint information. Muslim Action Committee sent a statement with more information on Cellebrite to City Council last week, and that statement is also on Instagram at CU Muslim Action. So thank you for considering this ordinance. I hope you continue to trust in the power of community input and vote in favor of it. Thank you.
My name is Terry Von Thaden. I live in southeast Urbana in a high crime area, as noted by one of Chief Boom's heat maps. As it is written, Ordinance 42 is too broad. I am in favor of rewriting it and trying to pass it. I 100% uphold the democratic process. I 100% uphold our American civil liberties, and I 100% participate in community activism. I work in the Office of Threat Assessment at the University of Illinois, and my doctorate is in information science. The court system is in place to protect our civil liberties and assure oversight of our technologies. The court system is in place to assure policing does not run amok. If we want to assure the safety of our citizens, we need to move into 21st century policing. As an aside, my son was shot in the head in October of 21 in Champaign. The only way they caught the man who did this was through the use of automated license plate readers. The only way they could upheld that they found him was through cell phone technology. If we want to assure safety, we need 21st century policing. I would advocate to rewrite this ordinance and revisit it. Thank you.
I always feel very short at this microphone. Dear City Council, I'm writing in support of the proposed public input process and council approval for new and existing policing technologies and databases. I have experience in this issue as the former organizing director of Media Justice, where I advocated at the federal level for media and technology policies to reduce harm to low-income residents and communities of color. The ordinance, as it is written, provides common sense, democratic review of increasingly powerful technologies. It allows residents to know about and have input on these technologies and for council to adopt best practice policies to regulate their use. This is simply the definition of good governance. I'm aware that the state ACLU has conducted a legal review of the ordinance before you. In addition, the ordinance aligns with recommendations by national leaders at the forefront of media and technology justice, put forth in their community control over police surveillance guiding principles. I sent you an email with those guiding principles, and I believe it's also in your packet. Democratic oversight of surveillance technologies are needed in any political climate. Even if only used by local law enforcement, mass surveillance technologies can be violating and dangerous. And I linked to you the human toll of ALPR errors for you to take a look at some of those harms. Democratic oversight becomes absolutely necessary under a president who has pledged to use technology and surveillance data for mass deportation of immigrants. I provided a link. To disrupt gender-affirming care, I provided a link. And to stifle reproductive health care. Once data is collected, Urbana can lose control of how the data that the police collect on all of us is used. It can be sold to the provider on the marketplace. It can be seized by the federal government. The IMC was part of a leak of the Diebold Corporation during the Bush election to show that essentially Diebold had engineered that they were using technology potentially that was black box technology that we didn't have access to turn the election towards Bush. And we were sued, and the Electronic Frontier Foundation defended us. So it's very important to know that actually if you collect the data, it can be sold and used in ways, even if there is state regulations in place. It is very much a Bitcoin kind of world of technologies being used in ways that we don't have access, we don't understand, don't have full control over, are not fully protected, are hackable. The entire Microsoft system went down 2 weeks ago, and organizations across the country were disabled. So even bad actors can use technology, access that technology, gain lists, and gain control of information and use it against people. This may sound like hyperbole or not, but it's not. I gave you a few examples. As the ACLU has reported, ALPR data has been used by ICE to locate and detain immigrants. We had a period of time under the first Trump administration, if you read the work of Brian Dolinar, the indie journalist who spoke, our neighbors were disappeared overnight in this community, in Shadowwood, in Urbana, and in our communities. They were taken away in the middle of the night during that administration. And there was very little to stop them. We are looking at Trump 2.0. It's going to be a totally different scenario. I personally believe that the city of Champaign should take their ALPRs, and the U of I should take their license plate readers down for 4 years, because otherwise they're actually creating a situation that could be used outside of the hands of our local municipalities to track, surveil, and do harms to communities. We should take it down at this point. And this is really the right approach. As Electronic Frontier Foundation shared, the ALPRs can be used to track those seeking abortions or reproductive care. I will skip to, I agree with the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Data sanctuary is strongest if there's less data to protect. Please vote yes on this ordinance so as to provide residents and counsel with democratic oversight of past and current police surveillance technologies. I do appreciate you for your service.
Hi, my name is Autumn Solomon. I actually used to live a block away from these chambers, and while I currently reside in Champaign, my family still works in Urbana and lives in Urbana, lives in the sense of that we shop and we enjoy things out here, so I consider that living. And I really enjoy the Urbana community, and we participate often. I have a lot of love and respect for my friends and neighbors, and I'm here to advocate for the collective benefit of Champaign residents. One of the things I cherish most about Urbana is the vast diversity witnessed in the people and the culture. Many of the immigrants or generations before them have come from countries where government surveillance carries a tremendous amount of trauma. Whether persecuted, intimidated, or imprisoned for their views, many families will have personal stories from corruption and abuse of power back home. I applaud Urbana for being a sanctuary city, and to maintain the welcoming spirit of that policy, we need to ensure that all of our other policies are in alignment with that. Anyone who has ever worked closely with the immigrant community knows there's a deeply rooted fear of government due to the abuses they've faced back home, as well as here in the US by federal agencies and sometimes local agencies. I also echo the deep concern expressed by those before me for people of color and other minorities, because the biggest threat to their safety is often law enforcement and government. While it may seem innocuous to some to deploy software, new technologies, or other surveillance measures, for many it invokes feelings and imagery of trauma and injustice. Technology can be hacked, sold, published on the dark web, or taken away by other agencies and used for more subversive measures. The people who have a right to consider the potential violations. So I encourage the council to vote in favor to maintain accountability, community input, and public control. Thank you.
Dear Mayor, City Council, and staff, I am Annie Adams, resident of Ward 1, Vice Chair of the Urbana Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, University of Illinois employee, and Urbana mayoral candidate. Ordinance number 2024-12042 before you today would establish approval, policy, and reporting of standard contemporary technology by the police department that is on par with the technology many of us carry in our pockets. This ordinance would require the council's approval for routine policy operations such as driver's license checks, vehicle registrations, and criminal history information. Meanwhile, the Champaign Police Department's investment in technology, with the support of their council, has made it easier for their residents to report crimes and made things more concrete to investigate, to solve crimes. Using tools such as online reporting of crimes to help with processing insurance for forgeries, theft, and traffic accidents. Their automated license plate readers have been essential in solving over 100 crimes that would not have been possible without that technology. Soon, they will integrate additional technologies at their 14 most crash-prone intersections to help people in need in their community. Most Urbana residents will find themselves in Champaign, on the University of Illinois campus, or flying out of Willard Airport. All three entities and our surrounding communities use technology solutions to keep citizens safe and solve crimes. I have been nearly killed by vehicles while on a bicycle and crossing streets as a pedestrian, stalked as a little girl by a grade school teacher, experienced a home burglary, and have been held up at gunpoint. I find it irresponsible that you do not want to use technology to help other people in similar, unfortunate situations. Since Urbana has lost 7 officers in the past 5 months, currently operates with only 3 to 4 officers at any time, 24 hours a day, and is on track to respond to 26,000 calls for service this year, allowing those officers to help citizens by using currently available technology solutions is essential and part of a contemporary police force. We would be unable to hire or retain officers if we do not allow the use of modern technologies. No one wants to work at a job where you are actively encouraged to de-skill. If you are determined to proceed despite the current staff retention issues, please send the ordinance to city staff for review. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jane McClintock, and I want to also echo I want to communicate my support for the ordinance. I think it's a common sense measure, and I want to say that I am deeply sorry for folks who have come and shared about their experiences of crimes, and I'm sorry that that happened. And I think that that's important input too. And I want to remind everybody that this ordinance is not for or against particularly surveillance technology, but it gives us an opportunity to have public input, to have a process, and to have some transparency around how it's used, and also just clarity so that we can, establish protocols that make sense for us, for ensuring civil liberties, ensuring good use of the technology, and that we have the right technology and we make the right investments. So I think it makes a lot of sense to have this kind of a process so that we can think through what we're investing in. I also think it's really good. We've talked a lot about community engagement, or creating more trust between the community and the police department. And I think that this ordinance and this kind of ordinance, where we can have a public process to talk through what kind of tools they need and how they're using them, really helps the community to better understand the police, and the police to better understand the community, which I think is really good for community relations. And then I also want to really thank the city staff for putting together the RFP for continuing the Alternative Response Task Force, which is really important. It's a lot less detail in the draft than I had seen in the initial Barry Dunn report, and I think that there's a couple things that I would encourage us to think about. I don't know if they need to be in the RFP, but with the initial RFP that Barry Dunn ended up responding to, there was a little bit more detail about who Barry Dunn would deliver the reports to, or the drafts. And I think that it would be a good idea to clarify that we would like the consultant to directly engage with the task force so that they could see any drafts and clarify for understanding, rather than having it have to go through a third party. So anyways, I really thank you for pushing that forward, and I support a vote of yes on this ordinance about public process for surveillance technology. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to email input.
Sure. First email we have, if we got a timer, I may or may not get through all this in 5 minutes. The following information is not a replacement for the 7 pages submitted by Melinda Carr on November 25th, 2024, in response to agenda item D3, Human Relations Report, pursuant to City Code Chapter 12-22G. This is an executive summary because the mayor chose not to read the previous request as done in past practice, but she noted the correspondence would be included in the public record. Tonight's agenda item F2 will change the name to the Human Rights Commission. Executive summary: inequitable treatment in the Human Relations Commission investigation process. The residents of Carver Park and surrounding neighborhoods of Urbana and Champaign, a historically African-American community, submitted a formal complaint to the Urbana Human Relations Commission on August 20, 2024. Despite the intent to address pressing inequities, the complainants face significant procedural and investigative disparities throughout the process. Key concerns: 1, lack of representation and engagement. Initial complainant and testimonies. The complainant included 16 named complainants, supported by public testimonies from residents such as Melinda Carr, spokesperson, and others voicing concerns about the adverse impacts of the Hope Village project. Exclusion of witnesses. Key contributors, such as Robert Lewis, proposing an alternative site design, were not consulted, and their input was omitted from the final report. 2, procedural flaws and lack of equity. Inadequate notification. Residents reported inconsistent and insufficient notification of meetings, decisions, and inaccurate records of notification. Lack of access to the final report. The complainants were denied the opportunity to review the final report before it was presented to City Council. Bias in decision-making. During the November 19, 2024 public meeting, a late arriving commissioner who had not reviewed the report was allowed to vote, significantly impacting the outcome. 3, unaddressed community concerns, traffic and safety risks. The access road, Carver Drive, was selected in lieu of Federal Drive via by right, which was previously rejected by a traffic study done in 2018, eliminating Carver Drive as an access road to that site. Unfortunately, the access point selected drew attention to the detention basin, which by code could not be fenced in and posed a hazard to the children and other potential disasters. Ignored alternative proposal. A community proposal alternative design addressing these risks was summarily dismissed without thorough evaluation. 4, legal and ethical violations. Ordinance non-compliant. The project disregarded local ordinances designed to protect neighboring residents from adverse impacts. Alleged legal oppression. The complainants described the process as legal oppression, citing procedural manipulation and neglect of African American voices in decision-making. Findings of fact. 1, unacknowledged community proposal. The alternative design presented by Robert Lewis to the Plan Commission was excluded from final considerations. 2, discrepancies in notifications. Residents identified conflicting records of notification recipients, including deceased individuals and incomplete mailing lists as it relates to Champaign and Urbana. 3, disparities in the process. The meetings were inconsistently scheduled, with at least one meeting canceled without prior notice, and a lack of disclosure of possible sites. Community requests. 1, based on Urbana City Council protocols, it takes 2 or more alderpersons to request that an item be placed on the agenda. We are asking 2 alderpersons to request this item be placed on the agenda for discussion in January 2025. 2, amend Urbana City Code Chapter 12, Human Rights, Section 1222G to ensure equitable investigation processes, timely notifications, and inclusion of all relevant testimony and documentation is upheld. The investigation and subsequent report by the Urbana Human Relations Commission is flawed in that it failed to meet the standards of equity, transparency, and thoroughness. The complainants urged the Urbana City Council to reject the current report and request due diligence in the execution of a fair process that genuinely considers the voices and needs of all affected residents. Respectfully, Melinda Carr, on behalf of residents of Carver Park and surrounding neighborhoods who signed the complaint.
Dearest council members, my name is Laura Haber, and I live at 412 West Green Street in Urbana. I support the ordinance introduced by Alderpersons Wilkins and Colasetti. I believe that it is incumbent upon our elected officials, in consultation with their constituents, to determine which surveillance technologies will be purchased and how they will be used by the police. We live in a time of increasing power of the state to infringe on civil liberties in the name of public safety, with sometimes dire, often unintended consequences. This ordinance will allow us to make thoughtful, informed decisions about which measures will be taken by our police department, with due consideration of how our information may be used outside of our jurisdiction. Thank you for your service to the community. Laura Haber.
Please read my comments out loud. My name is Laura Pencil, and I'm an Urbana resident and a local healthcare worker. I support the ordinance introduced by Alderpersons Wilkin and Colasetti. Transparency is vital to keep our community safe, and with emerging technology, it is key to have checks and balances within our government. Voting yes on this ordinance ensures this. I encourage everyone to pass this. Regards, Laura Pencil.
Next, from Ollie Greer. Please read my comment out loud. My name is Ollie Greer. I'm a CU resident and substitute teacher in the district. I support the ordinance introduced by Alderpersons Wilkin and Colasetti, as the technology around surveillance advances accountability and transparency through this ordinance helps us build a safer community. I would further add that we need less money for cops and more money for community and schools. We're in a huge teacher shortage, yet I see billboards all around town asking for more cops to sign on with a $10,000 bonus. Where is the money for teachers and schools? I know these budgets are separate, but I urge you to think about where we are pouring money and what we value as a community. This is Urbana-Champaign. We don't need super surveillance. We need more teachers and resources for our youth who are struggling.
Dear Urbana Mayor and City Council, regarding very timely proposed ordinance, because of the increased use of high-level technology in our economy, society, it is time for our elected government official in the city of Urbana to put in place constraints. We elected you. You represent us. We depend on you to look out for the public safety, which includes oversight of policies, procedures, and processes, especially our police department, as well as other departments as may deem appropriate. With collaboration with entities throughout, locally, countywide, statewide, nationally, the Urbana Council and Mayor are and should be the accountable and responsible body. Thank you, Bishop King James and Reverend Dr. Evelyn Underwood.
Good evening, Council. I would like my email read aloud and into the record. I'm writing to urge all of you to approve the transparency bill in front of you today. It's important for our police department to evolve with the times, and I encourage them to do so, but that cannot be done appropriately without community buy-in. As technology develops and new services are becoming available, our residents must have a seat at the table. This bill would ensure that any of the significant changes our city's law enforcement may face in the future are either implemented collaboratively or reworked to fit our entire city's needs. We have a great example to follow on this issue. The residents of our sister city, Champaign, are provided with a biannual report of all police technology statistics. They're also required to present requests to the City Council prior to any decision being made. That approach has resulted in transparency and the cumulative enhanced trust among the public and makes accountability for police possible. That's the kind of government that earns trust and respect from those we serve. Our residents are smart, they know what works best for them and their families, and they have a right to be informed and speak in favor or in opposition of the kinds of technological changes the police may pursue. I want everyone in Urbana to have the right, and I urge all of you to ensure they get it. Please vote for transparency and collaboration. Please vote for the transparency and collaboration this bill makes possible. Thank you all. Best regards to Sean Williams, Champaign County Democrats, Vice Chair, Cunningham 15 Precinct Committeeman, candidate for Urbana Mayor.
I request that this email please be read into the record as I am unable to attend in time for public comment this evening. Good evening. My name is Larry Lister, and I am a candidate for City Council representing Urbana Ward 2. I provide public input tonight regarding the proposed ordinance for increased oversight of police surveillance technology. This proposed ordinance has major implications on existing public safety operations and calls into question long-standing practices that are common in law enforcement nationwide. To my knowledge, it has no prior recent distribution, staff review, legal input, or police department input on the impact it would have. This would appear to require Urbana Police to ask permission from City Council for literally every aspect of not only new technologies, but also existing technologies for doing their daily jobs. For example, does this mean that the common use of Secretary of State database to conduct routine checks on criminal history, outstanding warrants, vehicle registrations, and driver's license needs to be re-adjudicated and potentially managed by members of the City Council? I also have concerns over the coincidental timing of release of this ordinance in the wake of recent News Gazette article discussing Chief Boone's concern regarding officer morale and loss of staff that Urbana has experienced. This is in rather stark contrast to Champaign, who reported at the recent Community Coalition meeting successful new officer additions over the past year. I remind City Council and my Urbana neighbors that Urbana went to a great deal of time and expense to break precedent of hiring from within, and after a national search, we selected Chief Boone to come in and change things up based on his experience implementing community policing. With this above stated, I ask that this ordinance remain in committee and be allowed to undergo the proper review, analysis, and input by the UPD, city staff, legal counsel, the local media, and public at large. I hope for this in the spirit that daylight is the best disinfectant, and as such, these new technologies be fully vetted with actual data from all sources, pro and con, including data and experiences with these technologies in question from surrounding Central Illinois communities that Urbana residents routinely interact with, travel through, and work within.
Next, please read the below as much of the forwarded correspondence found below into the record as time allows at the next City Council meeting. Please find below the forwarded correspondence between myself, Chris Zell, and the Urbana Police Chief asking for a public apology and resignation. If he fails to hold himself accountable as per the core values he's supposed to uphold when representing the city's mission, please move forward with a firing for cause. Any details to the referenced incidents over the last year can easily be provided from City Council recordings or minutes if you desire them. Forwarded message. You entered this community with a presentation filled with lies and misinformation. It weaponized math literacy to bamboozle the community and falsely represent yourself as having a data-driven history of success. I pointed out these issues to you, hoping you yourself was unaware and would resolve the issue moving forward. It's now clear it doesn't really matter if you did or did not know at the time, as after you were informed, you made no moves to redact or repair the misinformation you spread that evening, and instead comfortably continued similar behavior through the year, eschewing data-driven means and blatantly misrepresenting the data when scantily provided. This is a trend of behaviors that makes you grossly unfit for your role. You're doubling down on this unfitness, this laziness, this gross disrespect for our community by advocating Urbana city government make critiquing behaviors like yours unacceptable behavior in this community with enforced punishments. What kind of draconian future do you want for this community where you can knowingly spread lies you're never accountable for while embracing punishment and accountability for those critiquing your terrible behavior? If you're unfit for office for two independent reasons and need to apologize to the community before resigning. Lies, lies, and more lies. Figures never lie, but liars always figure.
I will not be able to attend the meeting. Please read this comment into the public record. Mayor Marlin and members of City Council, I am urging you to vote yes on the proposed resolution that would require to approve any purchased by the Urbana Police Department related to surveillance technology. This is a very simply matter of oversight and accountability. You, as elected members of our local government, are obligated to protect citizens, residents, and visitors from overreach by any branch or department of your local government. We know that surveillance technologies are disproportionately placed in Black, brown, and low-income neighborhoods. That hyper-surveillance leads to over-policing and racial targeting by law enforcement. I have lived in this community for over 35 years and served Urbana in USD 116 for most of that time. Urbana has not seen a dramatic rise in crime. You, as members of City Council, have a duty to this community to ensure that it is safe for all people. By allowing the police department to purchase high-tech surveillance equipment without any checks or balances, you are essentially giving the police the right to spy on the people of Urbana. Please do not allow surveillance technologies to become more important than the people you serve. Please vote in favor of the ordinance that requires City Council approval before such any purchase. Sincerely, Don.
Dear Mayor Marlin and council members Wu, Evans, Hersey, Colasetti, Bishop, Wilkin, Quisenberry, I would greatly appreciate your reading my comment below aloud at tonight's meeting. I, Lila Leopold, Ward 4, write in support of ordinance number 2024-12-042, an ordinance establishing approval, policy, and reporting requirements for police surveillance technology. I offer my heartfelt thanks to council members who put forward this ordinance and all those who are taking seriously the use of existing and future surveillance tools in our community. I urge all members of the council to seriously consider and support this ordinance and hope that the Urbana Police Department will see this not as a personal review of any particular member of our police community, but an important studied recognition of what it means to use these tools at all. These are tools which are never fully in the control of those who use them. I am sure many other members of the community will speak to the specifics of how the data such tools generate will never fully be under our control, nor fully under the control of any one police force. Urbana has a diverse community in any manner of categories. Race and ethnicity, gender identity, national origin, citizenship status are only a few. Our community is worth protecting at all levels, from physical violence to digital privacy. Data travels far beyond the confines of Urbana city limits, with the all too frequent potential to cause very real harm and damage, both within and beyond city limits. Especially in a politically polarized era, no community deserves to be a guinea pig for large-scale surveillance without cooperative oversight or meaningful legislation. It is therefore of the utmost importance to carve space through ordinance number 2014-12-042 for continued consideration of it, if, when, and how such tools enter our community. This is a reasonable and responsible action that needs to accompany the use of technology, which will never be neutral nor devoted to any one single intended use. Ordinance number 2014-12-042 would only help further a climate of transparency and safety among law enforcement and the community. Thank you for your consideration. Sincerely, Lyle Leopold, Ward 4.
Sorry, just making sure we get them all read that requested. Good evening. I hope you are all having a good holiday season. Please read my comment out loud. My name is Daniel Folger, and I am a Champaign-Urbana resident. I support the ordinance introduced by Alderpersons Wilkins and Colasetti. As the Champaign-Urbana Muslim Action Committee has pointed out, residents deserve to know before indiscriminate surveillance becomes normalized to our city. Perhaps this may curb infuriating events such as the felony charges leveled on 18-year-old student protesters, something that seems to me to be a clear message that free speech is conditional on what the message is. I couldn't have been more inspired by the action taken by UIUC students and professors to stand up against extreme violence, apartheid, and genocide, and believe that individuals who are willing to do so should be protected by the law, not targeted by it. All of this is to say that it is a great ordinance, and I'm glad to see it proposed. Have a great evening. Daniel Folger.
Dear Mayor Marlin and Urbana City Council members, I write in support of the proposed ordinance establishing policies and reporting requirements for purchase and use of police surveillance technology. Written policies go a long way to provide the public with some assurance that surveillance of the public will not be abused. There is consensus in Urbana and across the nation that police operate with too little accountability to the public or even to city councils and mayors. I believe strongly that if license plate readers would really help fight crime, the police chief and city council should work together to develop reasonable policies. Please do not dismiss the idea of accountability as being too burdensome. It is necessary. Thank you for your service, Esther Pat Urbana.
Council members and Mayor, hello. My name is David Cisneros. I'm a resident of Ward 4. I cannot attend the meeting today, so thank you for the opportunity to have my comments read aloud and into the record. I ask the City Council to vote yes on ordinance number 2024-12-042, an ordinance establishing approval, policy, and reporting requirements for police surveillance technology. This is an important policy that will establish democratic oversight on any surveillance technology that the city seeks to acquire in the future. As other commenters have probably already mentioned, this is crucial to protect the rights of Urbana residents by providing both transparency and accountability. The residents of Urbana should be informed about and be able to weigh in on any potential use of these mass surveillance technologies, and our elected representatives in the City Council should be able to exercise this oversight on behalf of Urbana residents. This is even more important given the incoming presidential administration explicitly promises to use state and local surveillance technology to persecute vulnerable communities. I want to address the two main arguments in opposition to this policy that I've read in the local news. First, I've read the mayor express concern that this policy did not originate from or have pre-approval from the city staff and legal department. However, this policy has an established legal and governmental precedent. Community control over police surveillance policies have been vetted and endorsed by many national, nonpartisan, not-for-profit organizations like the ACLU, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, Restore the Fourth, and many others. In addition, dozens of localities have passed similar ordinances, including Columbia, Missouri, and Oak Park, Illinois. The mayor explicitly stated last year that automatic license plate readers and other surveillance technologies should have to be approved by City Council, so there should be no concern with establishing that as an explicit and enforceable policy. City staff can continue to weigh in on the implementation of the ordinance, but our City Council has the duty and authority to create policies for the residents of Urbana, and this is clearly a proposal with widespread support. Second, I have read the police chief state that this policy would be an overreach. I have to fundamentally disagree that democratic oversight of policing is an overreach. In particular, I'm concerned with the comments in the news that automatic license plate readers, basic technologies that should be implemented without approval. There is extensive reporting and research about the dangers of ALPRs caused by misuse, overreach, and just plain errors. A simple Google search will provide literally dozens of news reports and policy briefs about the problems with ALPRs. The same City Council heard presentations about this last year, and you previously rejected the implementation of ALPRs. This discussion proves the necessity for an ordinance to provide transparency, oversight, and approval to any future implementation of such major surveillance technologies. I urge the Council to vote yes on Ordinance 2024-12-042 and to go further by continuing to prioritize the plans for an alternative response program, to reform the CPRV to provide it real teeth, and continue to provide funding for addressing the root causes of social unrest. Thank you for reading my comment, and thank you for your service.
Hello, please read my comment out loud. My name is Dua Aldasuki. I'm a CU resident. I'm a member of the CU Muslim Action Committee. We released a, We released a statement in support of the proposed ordinance included below, but wanted to also reaffirm our support for said ordinance via public input and email. The direction our country is headed when it keeps the police power and surveillance is quite honestly frightening. As a Muslim who remembers and experienced the discriminatory post-9/11 surveillance and abuse of power by authorities of our community, I ask Council to vote yes on this. Checks and balances create stronger systems and safer communities. Please vote yes on this ordinance and provide us with a layer of protections against surveillance. Statements press release below, please also read out loud. December 13th, 2024, CUMAC supports ordinance on police surveillance. Share CUMAC supports the proposed ordinance on police surveillance in Urbana and invites community members to join us at the Urbana City Council meeting December 16th at 7 p.m. to support the ordinance. Urbana, Illinois, CUMAC welcomes new ordinance on police surveillance and ordinance number 2024-12-042, an ordinance establishing approval, policy, and reporting requirements for policing surveillance technology and databases. This ordinance would require the Urbana Police Department to seek City Council approval before it can purchase and use surveillance technologies. It allows for a layer of protection for Urbana residents. CUMAC supports this step in keeping police accountable to the public. Discriminatory Islamophobic surveillance in the name of counterterrorism is something that we have experienced in this country since 9/11. This policy would ensure that the City Council can serve as a check on these technologies while allowing for transparency and public input around police surveillance in the city, says Sana Sabuwala, CUMAC member. Israeli digital forensics technology Cellebrite is already being used against local residents. Residents deserve to know and have official approval before indiscriminate surveillance becomes normalized in our city. CUMAC commends Alderpersons Wilkin and Colasetti's commitment to transparency and advocacy for their community. As the technology around surveillance advances, accountability and transparency through this ordinance helps us build a safer community. CUMAC encourages the community to join us at the Urbana City Council meeting on Monday, 12/16 at 7 p.m. 400 South Vine Street to support this bill and the City Council members working to create policies that protect our privacy and hold the police accountable.
Dear council members, I am unable to be present at the meeting tonight, so I wanted to express my support for the draft ordinance number 2024-12-042. That would require approval by the council for purchase, use, and reporting of police surveillance technology. I appreciate the hard work and careful thought that went into drafting this document. I understand as a draft, it may change in some particulars. The key issue, though, is that the city council and the public whom it serves must have the time and capacity to review and approve any purchase of surveillance technology, and if approved, how that technology is deployed. It is crucial that any data collected be secured and used responsibly as outlined in a use policy. In the last round of this discussion about license plate readers, I believe that a third party would have managed the data, a party over which we had little control. Given the potential for misuse and/or overreach with these surveillance technologies, it is essential that we, the public, have opportunities to ask questions, make comments, and consent to their use and relevant constraints if the technology is indeed used. Thanks for your consideration. Sharon Irish, 608 West Iowa.
Please read my comment out loud. My name is Deborah Hollenberg, and I have lived in Urbana resident for 10 years. I'm writing to state my support for the ordinance introduced by Alderpersons Wilkins and Colasetti. As surveillance technology advances, it is vital that we demand accountability and transparency through measures like this ordinance to help keep our community safe. Surveillance technology is often used as a tool of oppression under the guise of preventing crime. Convenient reminder that Urbana's crime rate is at a historic low. We must thoroughly research any surveillance technology proposed in our city and evaluate the potential harms and benefits that could come from it. Who has access to it, what groups will benefit, and who will it harm? We must look out for the most marginalized groups in our community, BIPOC, disabled, economically disadvantaged, and unhoused residents, as they are statistically more likely to be victims of police violence, especially in non-criminal encounters. Let us not forget that police are an institution originally founded to retrieve runaway slaves. Their work is to protect capital and the ruling class agenda, not the community. We, the community, keep us safe. Thank you.
Did we miss anything? Okay. All right, moving on. The next item is staff reports. Nothing?
Couple of announcements. One, I wanted to let folks know that the special census was completed as of Friday. The keys to the office were turned in by the Census Bureau, and they expect to have results of this recount done hopefully by mid-March, so we'll know. And I want to thank everyone who was in the targeted areas for participating in the census. Over the weekend, the city converted to M365. I want to thank our IT staff who worked 17 and 18-hour days on Saturday and Sunday to complete this. We have new email addresses. We have a lot of things new, so I'd ask the public to be patient as we adjust to this new system. But overall, it's gone pretty smoothly. Our new website was launched on Friday, and so far it's been actually very well received, and we've received some positive feedback. And again, thanks to the staff who worked really for 2 years to make this possible. And later on tonight, the Alternative Response Task Force draft of the request for proposals will be before council. They were emailed a copy of that last week, and we hope to get feedback so we can get that released right after the first of the year, because I know everyone is anxious for that to get back underway. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to new business. First item is ordinance number 2024-12-042, an ordinance establishing approval policy and reporting requirements for policing, surveillance, technology, and databases. And I assume you have, go ahead.
Yeah, if I may do an introduction and a little background. A lot of things are covered in the ordinance itself and in the memo. Some summary highlights of this ordinance is that this would require approval process for majority of council and a 45-day public input period, use policy, and an annual report for each policing technology or databasing that would be either future purchase or implementation, and also for existing ones, with a time period of, I believe, 180 days for the department to provide information on existing technologies. There's a clause that it's a little legalese language, but just simply saying that we won't sell people's data for our own monetary profit, and that no contracts or NDAs would supersede this ordinance, which is apparently a common tactic with some of these technologies, is to have an agreement that sets some exclusionary and kind of confidential things that would not be allowable under this ordinance. There's an attachment with a list of definitions for the relevant and non-applicable technologies and databases, what would be defined as minimally included in a use report, a use policy, and an annual report. And so I hope that this ordinance is clear and speaks for itself as much as legal language can. A little bit of background covered in the memo is that starting in 2021, this council and this Urbana community have discussed the use and policy requirements on police surveillance technology, specifically around license plate readers. There was a no vote to purchase license plate readers in Urbana in 2021 and proposed language for budgetary approval for such technology in the 2023 budget. Specifically around automatic license plate readers, but we've had conversations about the general applicability to other surveillance technologies. That conversations have led to the mayor assuring the public and council that ALPRs would not be purchased without majority council approval and public input. So the simple intent of this ordinance is just to codify that understanding that we've been working under and that we've been sharing publicly for years, especially as we go into a next round of people leading the city. So please remember that this ordinance is about a public approval process. It's not about dictating the use of any specific equipment or technology. If this ordinance were to pass, then there would be a vote on each specific technology. Future councils may choose to approve what technology they deem appropriate and how those policies should be tailored and implemented. It's important to apply to new technology as it continues to evolve, likely faster than the rate of legal review. We've seen this with many cities currently in lawsuits about the use of ALPRs and their violation of privacy rights, with or without specific instances, including Norfolk, Virginia, in some of those lawsuits currently. It's important to apply to existing technology. This was a recommendation from ACLU and other model legislation that was used in drafting this. It's important so that we know what we're currently using. I can't answer community questions about Cellebrite or any other surveillance technology because we don't know. And that's the importance here, I think, of it applying to existing technology is first of all for the knowledge and then for the public input and approval. And if they all make sense and they're fine, then as others have stated, it shouldn't be a problem to justify and approve its use. So this is just asking for policies and annual reports and an approval process from council and the public. I think it's our responsibility to have this approval and policies in place to protect residents of Urbana and protect the city from any potential legal repercussions of using these technologies. We've heard some feedback that there's some undue burdens, and I think this is a reasonable request for something that so greatly impacts the public. Again, this is just focused on policy, approval, and reporting. We did try to clarify the minimal expectations of the policy and reports in those definitions. And a reminder of the history here that there was a use policy drafted for automatic license plate readers by our police department upon council request in 2021. So this seems reasonable and something that was able to be provided previously. If people need more information about the harms potentially of certain surveillance technology in the future and currently, I encourage them to look it up on a simple internet search. I'm happy to include some more links in emails to council members and include it in a memo for the next week if people would like some more specific resources to look at. And as far as the review, I didn't clarify specifically in the memo, but there's some of the preliminary review that's gone into this is from the Illinois State ACLU legal review team. And there has been examples of this model legislation. A lot of this was taken from examples from the policing project at New York University School of Law. And we also had a lot of help, thank you to Tony Allegretti, who didn't mention that he's also an attorney and member of the Civilian Police Review Board. Anita Chan, who spoke tonight, and others at the University of Illinois Community Data Center have also reviewed this and have been doing some research from a community data perspective for years on these technologies. And there have been a few other experts and activists in the community. As stated in the memo, continued feedback is welcomed. I think that this is still a work in progress, especially from the city legal department, the Urbana Police Department, the general public, and other council members. I believe that this ordinance can be further improved with continued specific suggestions. I do ask for specific constructive suggestions if we want to make some improvements here. We have a few weeks until the next council meeting. Hopefully at the end of the meeting and council input, we'll be reminded when our next council meeting will be, but we have quite a few weeks until we meet again. So there's still some time to review this, get some more input. I support taking time for discussion to be had thoroughly and being sure that everyone has the information they need, and I'm happy to include that as needed. This ordinance was emailed to the mayor, council, the city attorney, and the chief of police on Tuesday, and I have yet to hear any feedback and look forward to hearing any as we continue these discussions.
James.
Yeah, thank you, Grace. I was looking through the definition section that was attached to this, and what I don't see is whether there's a distinction between surveillance technology and investigative technology. Is that intentional? Are you considering all investigative technology to be surveillance technology, or is there a distinction between those two?
If I may. I don't know that I have a good answer for that. I think there's a lot of overlap in that Venn diagram that a lot of technology goes into investigation. There's overlap. Some investigation may or may not require technology. Some technology may or may not require an investigation with a warrant and probable cause. And so I think that there's kind of that overlap. The definitions are hopefully encompassing the technology that are systems of a police function that are capable of collecting, retaining, and analyzing information associated with or capable of being associated with specific individual or groups. And then there's sub-definitions about what specific technologies are covered and what specific technologies are not covered. And if I may make a point here, you might notice that body-worn cameras are not really specified in here. And to my understanding, there is a state law on body-worn camera usage and policies that supersedes anything that we would write here. So this isn't applicable to body-worn cameras specifically.
I do have some follow-up. So I'll give you a couple examples, and you can tell me whether this is surveillance or investigative. If a vehicle is pulled over, and in the state of Illinois, vehicle has to have valid registration to be operated on the roads. The database to compare the plates of that vehicle to valid registrations, is that surveillance or is that investigative? In the state of Illinois, we use DNA to confirm or absolve whether someone was involved in the commission of a crime. Do you consider that surveillance or do you consider that investigative?
I'm trying to understand the question here because neither of those words are used here. We're talking about the policing technology, police surveillance technology, or database.
DNA is included in the list of items that is restricted.
But there's not really a distinction of investigative. I guess I'm not really understanding.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
So the databases that have specifically identifiable capabilities would be covered in a policing database under this ordinance.
So if we pass this, the Urbana Police Department would have to file a use report and get approval to do registration lookups on vehicle stops.
I think that's some of the gray areas, the details that we can decide here. I mean, you can look at the definitions, and these are from lawyers, and this is what it covers, and I think these are important things to talk about.
In follow-up, this is why I think the questions about involving city legal staff and the police department in the construction of this are important, because there's a lot of impact. We had a discussion about this in, I think it was in February, when or March when we were talking about adding this to the budget, a limitation on there. And I pushed back then because, again, it was too far-reaching. It was ambiguous in what it applied to, and I think we need to be more specific of that. And I do think we do need to have a definition.
Point of order, is this discussion or questions, just for clarification?
She asked me to explain what I was trying to get at.
We're at questions.
Thank you.
So did we get feedback from the police department or the city staff or the city legal attorney on how this was written?
As stated in the introduction, that was mailed to everyone on Tuesday, and I'm still looking forward to feedback.
Any other questions? Yes, Mary Alice, go ahead.
I just want to expand a little bit on what James was asking, because I hear different words, and I want to be sure I understand the intent of this. So a lot of people have talked about surveillance, but this actually rarely uses the word surveillance. It's within here somewhat. It primarily uses policing technology. So my question is this focused on policing technology geared towards surveillance, or is this focused on any policing technology?
As written, it is policing technology that is capable, so any technology capable of collecting, analyzing, retaining data that's personally identifiable. And this is model language from that policing project that I'd be happy to send.
Questions, other questions? Okay, I have one. How often would we have to go through the approval process for a technology? Once we approve a technology, would it just be approved for life or whatever, or do we get the opportunity to like review and approve technology, look at those biannual use reports and say, you know what, it's not doing what we thought it would do? Like, what's your ideas behind that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. As written currently, it is a one-time approval process. So once approved, that would be the end of the approval process. There would just be an annual report afterwards, which does ask for, among other things, justification for the continued use of the technology or database. But I think that's an interesting question, and there is currently no mechanism to discontinue a current system. It does currently require approval for a changed use of an existing technology, which is defined in here also, which includes linking, cross-referencing existing databases, adding new categories of data to a database, or using new analytical tools in an existing database. So with significant changes, that would require another approval, but as written, it is a one-time approval process.
I have a question.
Oh, yes. My goodness, Sharice, I forgot you were there. Please, go ahead.
Of course. Under what conditions would the City Council and all of its expertise, I suppose, determine whether or not a technology is or is not suitable?
If I'm understanding the question correctly, I think that's covered in Section 2, the standard for approval of policing technology or database, that says, in deciding whether to approve the request, the City Council shall consider whether the public safety benefits of the use of the policing technology or database outweigh the economic, social, and community costs, including potential negative impacts on civil liberties and civil rights, and potential disparate impacts on particular communities or groups.
Okay, so what I'm asking, though, is that who determines what communities, groups, or so on, whatever, so on and so forth, social, community costs, who determines the value of those groups so that we would, in fact, decide to use a particular technology? Do we decide that, or does the public? Do we have 3 town hall meetings for someone to make that decision, for the public to have their input? Of those meetings, do the people who may be having the technology or not having the technology, who would most affect, have any real say so, or will they be, we hear them and then we do what we vote on, how we want to vote? Who makes the determination of that? Is the city council?
Yes, the proposed language would be for approval of a simple majority of city council for approval, with some details in there of a 60-day period prior to council decision, where the information such as the use report and use policy would be provided to council, and a minimum 45-day period subsequent to that public releasing for public input. And so I think in theory, the idea is that the council would decide and they would have input from the police department and from the public in making that decision.
Okay, so I guess my other question is how is that, in fact, I guess when I think of public safety, I think of not just the benefits of a certain group, but how it would benefit everyone else also, or how it would, not. So what I want to understand is if there is a particular community that is suffering under a lot of other issues with criminal element or whatever in their community, how do they go about saying anything if they are in fact already kind of prisoners in their own homes? I don't know if you understand that concept.
I think as far as the public input, that would be under any of the standard existing mechanisms. I think the idea of town halls is an interesting one that's not currently required under this ordinance as written.
Okay, so, okay. Okay.
Any other questions from council members? Okay. Yes, Chris.
Thank you. I guess to echo what James was saying, right now, well, there is technology they're using, DNA, the Secretary of State database, the computers in the squad cars, and all that kind of stuff. And what the straw man that got in the room here tonight was that we would now have to approve all these standard technologies. Is that what's happening with this ordinance or not?
Yes, I think as currently written, the use of any technology or database that has personally identifiable capabilities of gathering information on the public would require approval.
Yes, Diane.
How many is that? I have no idea.
I don't either. I think that's one of the highlights of why this is important, is that we don't know, apparently you don't know, so the public doesn't know. So I think that highlights the importance of this, and I understand that some things will be routine and that I think likely a lot of the existing ones would approve and shouldn't have any problem, but I think that's the important point, is that we don't know what's being used and how much it's costing us.
Go ahead, Diane.
Isn't that something we would want to at least evaluate and explore before this ordinance is approved?
I think that's a great idea. If you'd like to come back with us on how many things this would apply to, I think that would be a useful piece of information, definitely.
Certainly an important one.
Yeah, go ahead, Grace.
I'd make a motion if we're done with questions. I would move approval of ordinance number 2024-12-042, an ordinance establishing approval, policy, and reporting requirements for policing surveillance technology and databases to City Council regular agenda.
Second.
It's been ordinance number. It's been moved by Councilmember Wilkin and seconded by Councilmember Colasetti that ordinance number 2024-12-042, an ordinance establishing approval, policy, and reporting requirements for policing, surveillance, technology, and databases be moved on to City Council for approval on the regular agenda. Discussion. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. So I want to speak to this. And also I want to thank Grace and the members of the community and the experts that she listed and working so hard on this. And to reiterate that this isn't new, I think good questions have already come up tonight. I think it's important that we have an opportunity to answer those questions. But this is something that's been talked about for years, and we haven't seen any response from the administration. So I think it's really important to acknowledge, yeah, people are asking, Councilmember Wilkin, tough questions. There hasn't even been an opportunity to ask, right? So at least now it's on the table. We can have those discussions. We can figure out how do we fine tune this to make it what it should be if there's additional questions that people have. But I do think that this is something that has been talked about and requested for years. It's come up at times often with the budget, and we've been told this is not the proper place, and I've actually voted against something like this because it has gotten too broad, but then there has never been an opportunity to bring it back up for discussion. So I applaud Grace's work on getting this to the table so we could have a meaningful discussion about this and hammer out some of those details that folks have questions about. I also do think that there is some urgency around this. I think that the fears that folks have around the safety of our community members, not from our police department, but from what's happening at the national level, changes the dynamic completely. So I think it is important that this doesn't get backburnered again, that there's meaningful movement, whether it's passing it as it stands or working on it to make sure that it fits what everybody wants to see come out of this. But I also think it is responsive to ongoing community conversations. It has been years since we voted down ALPRs. It has been years now that it's still being brought up as something that this administration and our police department think that we should have. That's disrespectful to our community. And if there's a way that we can figure out other ways to support the needs of our police department while also respecting the safety concerns and the fear of our community members, I think this is an opportunity to do so. I also think it provides more clarity. It's hard for people to say, well, how can you, continue to ask questions for our police department if there are no rules? There's no guidance on how we're doing things. I don't think it's fair to our officers, and I don't think it's fair to our community members. And I'd like to remind this council that our officers are not the only ones who took an oath to defend our Constitution. So did we.
Mary Alice, can the audience please refrain from making noise? Mary Alice, go ahead.
So my thoughts are this. I mean, I hear loud and clear from the vast majority, even the people who aren't in full support of this, who have some questions, that new surveillance technology is scary, right? And that it is an unknown in terms of what people can do with the data and how people are going to use the data. And I don't have any objection in terms of putting a process in for any kind of new surveillance technology that the city might consider implementing. I do think that this is very broad in using police technology. I think that there are some things that are unintended consequences. I would rather see this very focused on that police surveillance, which we've all been talking about. Just to give some understanding in terms of why I think it's a little too broad. So, Grace, you brought up body cameras. As I read the resolution as it is, body cameras would have to be approved by City Council because it's police technology. And you're absolutely right. There is a law in the state that requires that we use body cameras. And I was on City Council when we put the body cameras in place, and there was a whole discussion about who had access to the data, who could see the videos. There's a whole discussion about that. There's a whole policy around body cameras specifically because it was a new technology that was brought in. And the city, while we weren't the first to implement body cameras in the state, we were not the last either. So we had some time. I'm also thinking about the state's requirement that we now report pedestrian stops. That is a new piece of data that is added to a data field. So these are just kind of some examples of things that we are mandated by the state to provide, which it seems to me like this is also saying, well, in addition, City Council has to approve that. These are just two examples that immediately came to my head. I mean, I'm sure there's many others out there. So I feel like this would be better suited if we can move forward with new surveillance technology. And have that. I was also very concerned about the timing, given that if it sticks with police technology, that is all kinds of stuff. That is, I've been, came in and they tested marijuana to see if it was, marijuana, and that's tied to a police stop. Like there's tons of different kinds of technology that are used in day-to-day that I think that this might cover. And if we only give the police department 180 days to make a policy, to make a list of everything, I don't think that's enough time given our staff. So my direction would be, let's limit it to surveillance. That's what everybody is concerned about right now. If it comes to, we can expand it later, but right now, let's get it right, and let's work towards the main goal that I keep hearing people talk about.
Chris, go ahead.
Thank you. The final report of the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing on page 12 under Pillar 1, which is Building Trust and Legitimacy, the 1.3 recommendation says, quote, law enforcement agencies should establish a culture of transparency and accountability in order to build public trust and legitimacy. This will help ensure decision-making is understood and in accord with stated policy. There's nothing ordinary, standard, or routine about your cell phone being surveyed. There's nothing ordinary or routine and standard about getting your laptop monitored. There's nothing, and I think I want to echo what Mary Alice just said. We are talking about surveillance technology. What the community is, what I gave them as, cameras that look through walls, thermal imaging, high-powered microphones, that kind of intrusive, unexpected, unregulated surveillance is what the community is imagining as we enter this world of digital, gatekeeping, digital tracking, compiling the data. This crime center that's coming into campus, it's a whole new world that's coming. And I think the community has legitimate concerns. So, Grace, we got to find that balance. And I wish we could work with the police department and they should have wrote this instead of you. That's the thing that's really odd. So I would hope that we could work with our police department. There's all these claims of encumbering the department, hamstringing it, micromanaging it. And I don't want to be up here voting on whether they can have a coffee pot or not. I mean, just to make an extreme example. So we got to find a balance. I'm hoping that that Urbana could come to a policy about surveillance technologies that would be approval with the public, approval with what's needed with standard crime fighting. So I hope we can find that balance in a negotiated policy.
Diane?
The city is committed to transparency, accountability, oversight. That's demonstrated in our policies that we have. It was demonstrated when we discussed license plate readers. We developed a policy guiding their use right alongside it. And while some of you never hear from anyone who support the use of license plate readers, and I don't want to get diverged on this topic, but I will say one thing. I hear from plenty of people who ask me every single day why we don't have license plate readers in this community. It's who you see, it's who you interact with, and who people feel comfortable talking to. So there is community interest. But going back to this idea, this proposed ordinance, I appreciate all the work that went into it. It's a beginning. It arrived in our mailbox, in our email. I saw it 8:30 or 9 o'clock on a Tuesday evening. Last week was consumed with several big projects that we successfully launched, got off the ground. We're approaching Christmas break. People have already planned time off. While our next council meeting is scheduled for January 6th, there's a lot of time off and staff absences between now and then. And I appreciate the fact this is based on national and state templates, and the ACLU provided a lot of this language. We need an ordinance, and we need to approach this ordinance in the same thoughtful way that we approach every other ordinance that has far-reaching implications, and that is looking at the local impact. What is the impact on investigations? What's the impact on surveillance? What's the difference between the two? What technologies are we talking about? What are the definitions that people understand and agree on locally? What is the time involved? What is the financial impact? There are a lot of questions that have not been addressed in this ordinance. And yes, we need to work in a collaborative manner. The other thing that people should know is staff did not have any input on this. Police were not consulted. Legal department was not consulted. This arrived to the staff at the same time it was added to the agenda. And that's not how you develop thoughtful, local, effective ordinances. And this can be done, but I would ask you to keep it in committee to give us all working together long enough to get some of these questions answered. And we're just beginning to develop the questions.
Grace, you had your hand up?
Yes, thank you. So I definitely agree with getting some more input, and I appreciate that. I welcome input from staff in the police department, other council members, the public. Again, if you could please share specific feedback or suggestions, I think that's going to be more helpful for moving the document along to be even better in the end. I think it would have been great if staff would have drafted this 2 or 3 years ago when we brought it up and we said that we would have these policies in place. I am looking forward to feedback. We have a few weeks until our January 6th council meeting, and we can easily keep it in council. And if there are remaining questions, I am in support of that. I think that we need that input and collaboration, and we can keep doing that. Even if this goes to council tonight, we can keep it in council, and we have weeks and as long as we'd like to continue to refine it. As far as the definitions and surveillance tech and different definitions, I'm definitely open to that. It's that balance of kind of what I think is common sense language, how I would speak if I were just writing this, versus all of the lawyery languages and other kinds of examples, and wanting to be specific but also broad, because also understanding that this will encompass future technologies that we probably can't even fathom what they will be in decades down the road. I don't think we would have thought license plate readers would have been a common thing a couple decades ago. And so I'm happy to share, again, the examples where some of this came from and have some feedback, and I think we can definitely improve this with continued collaboration. As far as the 180 days, just want to clarify that it does say unless extended by council, so there is a clause in there. If the Urbana Police Department did need more time, if this were to pass, that they could request an extension to get all the information on their existing technologies.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, a few things. I think first, I just want to say this is a process that exists. There's nothing wrong with bringing this to council the way it exists. I think it's great that we're thinking about how do we add expertise. That's part of the point of this, right, is making sure that we're drawing on the expertise in our community. And again, I think there are good questions that have come up. But I do take objection to saying this is not how things are done. I think that often things don't get done because council members are told we can't. And I think that it's important that when someone is passionate and willing to push the needle and put a heck of a lot of work into saying this is something we've been talking about for years that hasn't moved forward, and city council is constantly told that we don't have enough staff to do things, this gets it moving, right? There's nothing that says this has to be the end, but this gives us a start because it wasn't moving otherwise. I also think it's important to recognize that there has been a history of things being not in keeping with the intent of city council when it's been exclusively in the hands of city staff. So there has to be that balance. There should be input from the police department. There should be input from more council members, but it's important if, you know, this is something that we said at the beginning of this term and we're facing the end of this term, that it doesn't just get backburnered for the remainder of this time. So I'm still in favor of moving this forward, but making sure that there's continued opportunities for conversation and input from all of the parties who should have a say in how this moves forward.
Mary Alice?
Yeah, so my thoughts are, I think this is better suited to be kept in committee. And one thing that we haven't talked about was the impact on Melissa. She's the person who collects the data. She's the person who runs the data. I'd have questions about, like, what happens with the data that they're providing right now with the hot spots in terms of where the gun violence, like how does she read this in terms of how it impacts her work, because she's leading that team. So I'd really like to hear from the people who are doing the work, how they interpret this so that we can make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of the intent of city council, and they understand that. Usually when I talk to police officers, they're very, very linear. Okay, this happened at this place, that's what this is. And so they're gonna read this in a very linear fashion, and so it would be really good for them to have an opportunity to tell us what they think it says, so that we're all on the same page. So my preference would be that we keep this in committee. My preference would be that we focus this on surveillance technology. And my preference would be that we ask for the police department, including the data, Melissa's group, and legal at the city to review it and to give us some feedback and direction. Not necessarily direction, but things that come to mind.
Chris, you had your hand up. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, thank you. I'm leaning towards where Mary Alice is. I do want to say that keeping it in committee to January 6th, I think council has to recognize that being ready to have all the information that we might ask for in this process, that we may have to go another round of keeping this in committee if that's the target that we were looking for. I was going to suggest deferring this to the committee of the whole on the 21st to give time for that. I don't want to do that because frankly I don't like how that looks, because the 20th is an ominous day in my mind. So one thing I want to add, I really think we need to get down, as my questions implied, we need to get down to the focus on surveillance. And thank you, Chris, for clarifying that for me in your comments. I also want to raise another kind of technical concern with Section 2, which appears to try to designate how a future council will act. I'd like to remind council members that we can't bind a future council to act in a certain way. So while that may be what we want them to use as criteria for reviewing these things, we cannot speak to how they will do that or how they will interpret which side of the or, there's an or here of public safety benefits or outweigh these other benefits. Public safety can have economic impacts, right? Public safety can have community costs. They're two sides to that or in that balancing act. And so we can't, if we pass this and think that we can bind a future council to behave a certain way, that we are mistaken, because we can't, a future council can act under their own intent. I do believe, I think one of the people in public comment said this very well, that there are good things here and it should be rewritten. It should be focused on what's going on. I believe when we talked about ALPRs, which by the way was a 4-3 vote, I'd like to point out that while the memo here says that was clear council intent, 4-3 vote on a 7-person council is not clear intent. It shows a divided council decided by, one vote. I think when we were talking about ALPRs, my concern, and I voted for that, I was one of the 3 who voted for that, but it was with the caveat that I believe that the guardrails and the management of the use of the data, the policy had to be clear. At the time, I did not feel like it was strong enough to move that policy to move forward. I also feel very strongly that the vendors in this situation need really strong scrutiny. And I'm afraid to say that contracts don't always prohibit behaviors that we would not want to allow. So reputation is important. If a contractor has been caught violating the terms that have been put under it, we have to be willing to revoke the contract. We have to be able to choose to work with vendors that have a history of good stewardship, particularly of data. This is high concern for me. I'm a doctoral student. My research is on the ethical use of student data in making decisions about student success. And what I find is that the discussion about the ethical use of data and its impact is not ever as strong as it needs to be. And so a lot of the aspects that are in here, I want to support. I think it's too ambiguous. I think time in committee, feedback from different areas. The other thing I want to mention is somebody today told me that they thought that the city of Champaign had a reasonable approach to data use reporting. I don't know if that's true. I'd like more time to look into that and understand if they actually have a good practice that we could learn from or borrow from. And so I'm going to support us keeping this in committee, but I do ask that we recognize that some of the data that we're looking for, some of the feedback that we're looking for may not be able to happen in the 2 weeks between now and January 6th, just because of the time of year and the availability of people. So, thank you.
I would like to, since I'm not being called on, so
Yeah,
I
go ahead,
gotta
Sharice.
get my time in when I.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chandra. I would also agree with James on regarding as this is written, I could not support it. There needs to be some clarification about a lot of issues, and I've only gotten to read it once, so and I didn't get to go through all of the research and so on and so forth. I would like more time to actually be able to do that. And with it being a holiday season, that time is already scheduled, and I did not plan to schedule a reading of this ordinance during that time. So, and I also can't support it without the input of the people that it will most impact, which will be the police officers in our police department, as well as the community. If we're going to do this, I think that maybe there should be a couple of town halls as well to discuss this particular what they see is impacting on them. And I know there's a lot of fear of surveillance and so on and so forth, but just like any type of technology, there may be times when there's a benefit for that surveillance and when there is not. And, you know, we have a fear of technology now. Personally, I'm not a big AI fan. We have this fear of technology, but like anything, nothing is good or bad except how you use it. So we might want to be more insightful about that, and not think about also like the technologies that we're using already that help our officers solve certain crimes. Do we really want to go back and have to approve all of that? Do we really want to be the purveyors of what is good and what is bad when they already have used some of this technology to be successful in solving certain crimes? I think that's something that needs to be rethought. And I'm done.
Okay, thanks, Sharice. James, go ahead.
So, point of order, if we want to retain this in committee, would it be better to have a motion to defer it to the next committee of the whole, or to have Grace withdraw her motion and move to hold it in committee?
If the original makers of the motion are open to it, it can be amended to, the motion can be amended so that it be deferred to or stay within committee of the whole.
Is there any further discussion? I'd like to say something. James, would you take the chair?
Yeah, I'll take the chair. The chair recognizes Chandra.
I fully support the principle and what we're trying to do with this ordinance. I'm fully in support of transparency, especially when it comes to policing. There are a few things that I sort of thought of as I was reading this and doing some other research. I am interested in what happens if there was like an emergency and there needed to be a use of technology that we hadn't used before, but it's available in this emergency situation. Does the police department have authority to use a new technology in an emergency situation? And also narrowing the scope, as some of my fellow council members have mentioned, narrowing the scope of the surveillance technology, maybe just to the high-risk technologies like facial recognitions, ALPRs, and things like that, versus the Secretary of State database. So I definitely think that there is some good stuff here, but also some things that need to be added or changed. So yes, I would definitely be in favor of keeping this in committee so that we can continue to work on it.
Would you like the chair back?
Yes, I'll take the chair back. And Grace, go ahead.
Oops, thank you. As I said, I'm definitely down for more time and more discussion. I'm curious if anyone wants to share why Committee of the Whole has an advantage over council. I understand that it's more in control of council members by the way it's chaired, but it also, usually COW meetings are a lot longer because this is the first time we've seen something. I think that typically council meetings, when we have stuff on a consent agenda or we've already reviewed it, typically there's a lot more time available in a council meeting. So to me, that seems just logistically to make sense, and I don't see a benefit or a difference other than who's chairing the meeting on whether it's in COW or is in council, where it can be deferred by one person in a second the first time around and then a vote the second time it's deferred. So even moving to council, it can be deferred to stay in council from there.
James?
Yeah, my distinction on that is something going to council is pretty much whole and ready for final action. I know at times there are details that we understand need filling out with that, but the body of what we pass on doesn't change. It's usually filling in some blanks, and I feel this actually needs more work before, if it came to a vote tonight, I would vote no in its present form. And I don't want to do that. I'd rather have more working time. Committee of whole, I feel, is working time to develop a better version of it for council action. And that's why my thought is that we should keep it in committee. I would ask, Grace, that you consider doing that. We can also accomplish that by deferral.
Yes, Mary Alice.
Yeah, so I feel like when we announce, well, council is the final action, or whatever gets passed. And when the agenda is posted along with the meeting packet, that's what the public expects us to vote on. And so if whatever we pass to council, well, it certainly could be amended during council, I feel like a community looking at it would say, this is the final action that the council is talking about taking. So I'd rather have something much more solid going to council rather than keeping it in committee, because I don't think it's at that final stage yet.
Yes, Grace.
For the sake of if it will help other council members feel more comfortable, and I hear your points of getting to a more finalized version before council, I am willing to change my motion to keep this in committee of the whole, which I believe there is no deferral mechanism in COW.
And the second, do you agree as well?
Yes, for the same reasons. I don't want to see this die here.
Do we need to put a date on that? Or just next committee of the whole is fine?
It does need to be voted on.
Okay.
And you can just say the next committee of the whole.
Okay. Any further discussion on the amendment? Yes, Gia.
Yeah, I'm just going to reiterate, I think it's important that there's time for questions to be answered, but I do want to make sure it's clear that keeping this in the committee of the whole doesn't mean that it's less important than it going on to council, but that it's in response, the part of what we're saying is we want this to be responsive to the community. We're hearing from other council members that there's a desire to keep it in the committee because that tends to be how we do things, but I'm just going to say again that this is something that I think deserves attention, has already had a lot of work put into it, and can't just keep getting pushed off, and that we're very lucky to see it in this, having this much detail, and it's just a matter of improving it from here.
Any further discussion? Okay. Do we need a roll call vote, or would you prefer a roll call? Okay. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin?
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes, and this ordinance will stay in committee. Okay, next item on the agenda is ordinance number 2024-12-043, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 12, Human Rights Ordinance, changing the name of the Human Relations Commission. You have to press in the green light. Okay.
There we go. I can never tell if it's bright or on or not. Good evening, Council. We are here to talk about ordinance number 2024-12-043. We are requesting that the council approve the attached ordinance that would formally change the name of the Human Relations Commission to the Human Rights Commission in Chapter 12 of the City of Urbana Code, the Human Rights Ordinance. Some background, I believe you all received the memorandum. And, oh, let me pause. I'm sorry.
Not at all.
Please.
For those who don't know me, I'm Pete Resnick. I'm one of the members of the Human Relations Commission, and am the longest serving member on the commission at the moment. So Carla thought it might be useful for me to come and speak about the changes.
Pete is our resident historical person on the council. Whenever we have questions, he usually has information about it, so I think he's the perfect person to be here with me for this request. The Human Relations Commission and the Human Rights Ordinance was established by ordinance in 1975, so that it's been called the Human Relations Commission since then. In October of 2021, the Human Relations Commission, after a lot of discussion and consideration, and they voted to change the name of the commission so that it would be in more alignment with my office. And so after a long review, forgive us for that, we are bringing it before you today so that we can update the ordinance to reflect, or update the commission to reflect its connection to the ordinance and to my office, and also to update some of the language to make it more gender neutral, to keep it in alignment with the other policies of this city. You have the memorandum before you. Just highlighting some things, is that updating the code and other official documents would provide a concise and modern reflection of the commission's mission, making it easier for residents and stakeholders to understand its role and purpose. I can tell you that in my office, I get numerous calls looking for human resources. They think, or, you know, things that our office does not address. They contact our office, and I think because of the name, confuses our community. And so I'm not sure if the commissioners received that, but we wanted to make sure that those who are looking for us, they were able to reach out to the, if they're looking for human rights, we're the ones that are able to do that.
I'll say when we had this discussion, most bodies that do the kind of work that we do refer to themselves as human rights commissions. That seems to be the term of art. Back in 1975, it might not have been. And I know that when I speak to people in public, I often tell them that we work on human rights and don't use the name of the commission. I think it will reduce some confusion and put it into better alignment with the rest of the, with the name change for the office as well. So I think it's relatively straightforward.
So we're hoping that you will approve it to move on to council and to be approved, for the name change to be approved and the other additions to be updated.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? No questions? Yes, Mary Alice.
Can I make a motion?
Please.
Okay. I will move on to the consent agenda, ordinance number 2024-12043, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 12, Human Rights Ordinance, changing the name of the Human Relations Committee.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mary Alice and seconded by Grace that ordinance number 2024-12-043, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 12, Human Rights Ordinance, changing the name of the Human Relations Commission, on to City Council for approval. Did you say a consent agenda? On the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Yes, Mary Alice.
I just wanted to say thank you. I know that we're always trying to kind of clean up language and move us forward into where we are right today. And in the 1970s, things are a little different. I actually happened to work with a group called ISIS, which is not a very good name these days, and it was named in the 70s. So, so thank you for your work and for seeing this through.
Chris, did I see your hand up? No, Chris.
Also just want to say thanks for your work on this. I think it totally makes sense. I've often wondered why it wasn't called the Human Rights Commission, so I think that this definitely makes sense, hopefully much more clear for the public. And it looks like you've also changed to gender-neutral language that we've been doing across city things. So I appreciate that, and thanks for doing it.
Any other discussion? Okay. Oh, Jaya, please.
This is just a nitpicky thing, but I also appreciate the change from citizens to persons. I think it's really important that we recognize that it's not just citizens who live in our city.
If I can just say, I was at another meeting where I'm the vice chair, and they called me the vice chairperson. And I said, can we fix that? And so they're going to change that, because the chairperson, the chair was actually chairman, and they said that, and I'm like, we need to fix that.
Yeah, technically, we are still aldermen. Okay, any other discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition?
Aye.
Okay, that passes. Next item on the agenda, thank you so much. Just rolling. Next item is resolution number 2024-12-086R, a resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement for the donation of land to the Champaign County Forest Preserve District.
This resolution would authorize the transfer to another governmental entity, which is the Champaign County Forest Preserve District, of a parcel of land that we had purchased on Main Street for the ultimate purpose of donating it for the Kickapoo Rail Trail. It was also happened to be a blighted property at the time, so that was part of the original acquisition, but this is a property at 2310B East Main Street that we are now finally trying to transfer at no cost to the Forest Preserve to be included in the KRT. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Therese? Yes, Grace.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, just to clarify, you said that this was originally purchased for $1,500 or so, I think, with the purpose of being part of the Kickapoo Rail Trail. Is that right?
Yes, although if you read the memo that went with the ordinance when we bought it, it was focused more on the blight relief, but we did talk about inclusion with the rail trail as well.
And I noticed that the address is a B. Is this like a full parcel, or is this a shared lot in some way?
There's a, if you look on page 42 of the packet, you'll see there's a GIS plat there. And so it has a Main Street address, but it's like it looks like a rear lot, and there's some stacked lots in that area.
So is there access off? Yeah, that's what I was trying to understand. The East Main Street's the address, but it looks like it's kind of closer and more oriented towards University.
Yeah, there's a driveway off of Main. I don't know if it's a shared driveway or an easement or what.
Okay, but I imagine that there's been conversations with, the potential donor and how this would or would not work well as part of the interconnected rail trail.
We're the donor, actually. We bought it from someone several years ago, and now we're the donor to the Forest Preserve.
Yes. But that they have a plan and a vision that this property can work for them.
Yes,
as
they
part
do.
of the rail trail.
Yes, and we had talked about that. They've explored a number of different connections between the trail as it goes along University and coming down to Main, and this is the preferred connection rather than using like Smith Road.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Carol?
I I'm sorry. I imposed on Grace's time for a minute there. Can I ask a question?
Please go ahead, Sharice.
I'm trying to figure out, is it the little brown areas that are highlighted, that are, we're talking about giving to the park preserve? I'm trying to figure out how this goes, because I see Smith Road, and then I see some other parcels that are highlighted around. Is all of that going to Kickapoo?
No, just there's, if you're looking on page 42 on the showing the plat.
Mine says page 68. Is this the GIS web map?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, it is. I'm so sorry.
Oh, sorry, I guess it depends on if you're looking at the version with the minutes or not.
Oh, okay.
It's a big difference.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at page 68.
Is that the page that you?
I'm just trying
yes,
to.
that's
I'm just
correct.
trying to figure out what is what. Actually, I don't have the.
Okay, so can you see the eastern edge of Weaver Park? Do you see where the eastern edge of Weaver Park is?
Okay.
Now, draw an
Yes,
imaginary line north of Main Street, and then go over one, and there should be a one little parcel highlighted in pink. That's
see
that's the
that.
parcel in question.
Oh, just that little piece of parcel?
Yes,
The little pink part.
just the little pink part.
Okay. Because I wasn't sure. I was like, are we giving them all of this? I couldn't tell what was the part we were giving.
We don't have
donating,
all
and
of
what
it to
part
give, so.
was the rest of. So that now, are there parcels next to the little pink one already have land? I mean, houses, homes, people are there. living
I
there?
don't know what's on the different parcels adjacent to this.
Okay.
I do know they were able to
Okay.
get the front piece. That was a challenge, but they were able to buy that piece, the park or the forest
Okay.
preserve.
Okay. So they were able to buy the parcel that's adjacent going south
Correct.
toward Main Street.
Yes.
Okay. And then we own the little pink part.
Yes.
So these are actually two little. Okay, I see what you're talking about now. Thank you.
Yep.
Any more questions for Carol? Mary Alice,
Can I make a motion?
I think we're ready.
All righty. I'm going to make a motion for the consent agenda for resolution number 2024-12086R, resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement for donation of land to the Champaign County Forest Preserve District.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mary Alice and seconded by Jaya that resolution number 2024-12-086R, a resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement for the donation of land to the Champaign County Forest Preserve District onto City Council for approval on the consent agenda. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, that resolution passes. Next, we'll move on to discussion. First item for discussion is continued ARPA reallocation.
Thank you. Good evening. So today's discussion is a continuing discussion of our remaining ARPA funds that have to be obligated by the end of the year. So just this is kind of continuation from a discussion that we had in October, which there were two parts. The first part that we had talked about was about $300,000 of unspent and unobligated ARPA project funds, which at the time we talked about moving it into social service. And last week with our grants management division, we talked about having a second round of the HHI program for those funds. So that is all taken care of and squared away. We know what to do. And then the second part of our initial discussion that we had, which we didn't quite come to a definitive resolution on what to do, was the about $300,000 that we expect to be unspent or unutilized funds for the sanitary sewer lateral project. So the discussion today is just to kind of continue that discussion and hopefully come to something that we can obligate the funds for that provide us enough flexibility to change things in the future if we desire. So there was a couple questions that came up again last week, and just so that we're clear about what is an obligation. There's two ways to obligate funds according to the Treasury guidelines. The first would be a signed contract, or a purchase order in our financial system. The second one would be an interagency agreement, which you can see the requirements there for below. Council action ordinances, resolutions, putting it in a budget line item do not count as an obligation for the Treasury guidelines, which in some ways seems more definitive than an interagency agreement, but that's the Treasury rules, so that's what we're going to do to make sure that we obligate the funds appropriately. And of course, there's different ways to obligate funds and report funds, so that's another fun thing, but JD gets to deal with that and not us. Another thing that's come up is making sure we stay clear of the supplant. So as far as Treasury guidelines go, that supplement, not supplant requirements only apply to surface transportation and Title I eligible uses, and all of our projects, both for what we're talking about tonight and previous discussions, are all from the original ARPA eligibility guidelines, so we don't have to worry about those rules. And just kind of clarifying what happens after the end of the year is if a project doesn't spend all of its funds, those funds can then be reclassified to another ARPA eligible expense provided for that was obligated prior to that deadline. So if something's an ARPA eligible expense and we had a contract for it, or a PO, or an interagency agreement, we can kind of modify the project scope or increase funds appropriately to make sure we spend those funds that we have by the end of 2026. So where we picked up, or where we ended at our last discussion, was for the lateral lining project. We have about $300,000 based off the eligible properties that we don't expect to spend. And a couple of big picture ways that we could kind of have something that fits in the same idea or the same scope was to have a second geography to do that same project in, or program in, to kind of create or expand a lateral lining program citywide. Or we also talked about having other equal investments through our equal program, and we didn't quite put a pin in it on which one was preferred. So what you have here is just kind of a draft to work off of something that I think would provide the city a lot of flexibility. It's really just talking about the city's equal program and using both our equal language and then the ARPA language for disproportionately impacted communities. And actually at the end there, I also threw an additional line in there about sanitary lateral improvements. So kind of shoehorning our ARPA funds into the equal program, but also providing us a lot of flexibility so that things can change. I'll just go to the next slide real quickly and we can go back. So using kind of the scope of work above, it obligates the funds to a similar type of project prior to the deadline for a program that we know we're going to spend, that we can spend all the funds on. And since we don't have to worry about the supplant measure, by adding in the ARPA funds into the equal program at a later CIP discussion, we can talk about what we want to do with those CR&I funds that are there now. We can, there are a lot of competing interests in our capital improvement plan, so we could keep it in the equal program. We could move them into sewers to create a program. We could, there's a lot of competing needs. Transportation is always a need as well. So the kind of the paragraph above would give us both the ARPA guidelines that we have to meet, but also future flexibility since we don't have to worry about the supplant provisions. And just kind of big picture questions, if we need to get the conversation started, is if there's any detail we want to include before we have the interagency agreement, or if there's any additional items or topics that you want to make sure are included in future discussions if we go this route. And that's all I have. So,
questions for Will? Yes, Grace. Oh, go ahead, Sharice. We'll start with you.
No, that's okay. Let her go.
Okay, Grace.
I was trying to understand your interpretation of when we need to do this, Will. I guess I'm not understanding if we need to do this, make this decision essentially tonight before the end of 2024 calendar, or, okay, just to clarify the slide, you're saying that if a project doesn't use all of its funds, so it sounds like that's where it currently is. The money is already allocated to a project that is not finished yet, right? But we anticipate that it will likely not use all of them.
correct.
Or you're interpreting that we don't have longer because it's already allocated currently.
Can you say that last part again?
That like it's currently allocated to a project, so I'm just not understanding why we couldn't theoretically wait until February, anytime next year, and say, hey, this was already allocated and we're not going to be able to use it all, so now we're reallocating it because it's already been allocated.
Mm-hmm. So the sanitary, the full 1.2 and change has been obligated to the sanitary lining project. If no action, no interagency agreement were to take place between now and then, that project would still proceed, and then at the date that those funds we knew for certain weren't going to spent, we could then re-obligate it. But if we don't have decide to re-obligate it now, there are some equal projects that wouldn't necessarily then be obligated prior to the obligation deadline. So we would lose out on a little bit of flexibility going forward. It would have to be something that was previously obligated, if that makes sense. So we don't fall off a cliff, we don't lose the money, but we do reduce the number of items that we could move that money towards afterward, the date.
James.
Yeah, I thought we were talking about funds that had not been previously obligated, that we had withheld because we didn't know how much the administrative costs were going to be, plus one project that failed to launch. I thought we were talking about those funds, which are currently unobligated, right?
So going back to the first part of our discussion, those are the funds that we obligated to the social service funding.
Okay.
But as we were going through that and, talking with Tim, we were pretty certain that we are not going to spend at least $300,000 and up to $500,000 of the sanitary sewer project.
But that's not a decision we have to make before the end of the year.
Correct. But if we want to...
Because that's an obligated project that's ongoing. When we figure out it's not going to spend it, we can shift it to, like you said, the equal.
We can shift it to projects that are properly obligated prior to this deadline.
Sorry,
So-
the similarity of that $300,000 number
Yes.
had me thinking about the unobligated funds that we moved to the social service grant. Thank you.
Gia.
To further clarify, oh, sorry, Sharice never got to go.
Yes, I'm sorry, Sharice. Go ahead.
Hey, out of sight, out of mind.
Yes.
I think the main question I have, because the sewer sanitary project is an award, what I would like to see, to be honest, is there are other probably equal, what would be called equal projects that could happen still in that area. My notice is basically stop signs that I think need to be flashing stop signs and have some solar mechanism so they wouldn't cost a lot, but for me, it's a public safety issue, especially around King School and on Fairview and Kohler and Fairview and Busey, where I actually see people running those stop signs, and in Kohler going north, there's no really good lighting, and I don't know if people just don't see the stop sign, but I don't want there to be any mistake. And there are a lot of people that walk from Carl to their cars in the parking lot there, the fairground parking lot. And some people, I think, even probably walk home. And it is, for me, it's a public safety issue. The stop signs around on King School, Beslin and Goodwin, I think that they also, it's a public safety issue, especially for kids when they're going to school. And at night, when the lighting there is, once again, somewhat dim, I would like to see some flashing stoplights, and I've asked for these before. Of course, I'm adding the ones about King School because it just occurred to me. But I asked for them with the equal thing. If in fact there's enough funds, I'd like to see that come to fruition. So I don't know if you asked for ideas. That's an idea. Okay. And I'd be happy to hear from other people in my ward, in particularly if they think that there could be other things that could possibly be done regarding some kind of issue with that.
Okay.
And I'm done.
Thank you, Sharice. Jaya?
Just to further clarify, if we don't make any change right now, basically we could only use it for a similar purpose. Is that why we're clarifying that this would be another, basically, for lack of a better way of putting it, allowable use if that money isn't spent on the sanitary sewer lining project?
Yeah, this adds equal projects to ARPA, to the list of projects that are ARPA obligated prior to the deadline. And then post the deadline, you can move funds between different projects as needed. But yeah, this gives us the maximum amount of flexibility without impacting that project as it is now.
Chris, go ahead.
Well, while we're throwing out ideas, the lateral lining money, got a constituent, been in business for over 20 years, got a, you mentioned in your slides that other geographical locations could be used for that money. I just kind of want to throw out the idea that maybe a specific project in another area with that money could be done.
Jaya, go ahead.
So I was just going to say, I like what you have drafted. I think it does provide that flexibility, and then I think that gives us the time to say, okay, we're going to try to focus it on equal projects in Ward 3 still to serve the community it was intended for, or are we going to expand it so it's a wider sewer lateral project, whatever. But I think this, to me, gives us the flexibility to say this is also allowable, right? And it's not saying that if the residents in that area are able to spend all the money, great. That's why we said it was for. But if they're not, this means that we can use it for something other than just sanitary sewer linings in that area if people don't take it. So I think that's great.
Mary Alice?
I just wanted to say I agree with Jaya I'm just going to say ditto. All right.
Grace, go ahead.
Yeah, I think simply put, I'm in support of moving it to equal stuff as suggested. And it sounds like that doesn't really limit our future uses, right? Like even if we put it in equal and we decide, hey, there is another neighborhood or some people who didn't get involved in the first round of sewer lateral lining, it seems like that could still be a possible use of equal funds. Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like your proposal here is supported by majority of council.
Thank you.
Do you need something more formal? Do you need thumbs up?
If you would like to, I mean, it doesn't hurt. Yeah.
Yes. Sharice, are you a thumbs up?
Yeah, I'm a thumbs up.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you, Will. Next item for discussion, excuse me, is the alternative response RFP draft that we all received. How do we want to kick this off? Yes.
Just wanted to say, so I know that the mayor had mentioned that our email systems have changed. I have not been able to get into emails. I have not read that, and I think, yeah, just wanted to throw
Me either. I can't get in my email.
Well, I do know it says that you wanted to release this on the 1st of January. So if there is a way to give us a synopsis or something of what the report contains, or not the report, yeah, like words is getting late.
Probably not very well on the fly. I think those dates are in there are just, I don't want to say they're made up, but they're just target dates if things get pushed back. I think the day it goes out is one day, and the other thing to consider is the spacing between the dates, and the timeline is the other one. But the first is not by any means a hard deadline, or just I know that's a priority, so that's why it was soon.
Okay. Is there anything from those who may have had the opportunity to read it? Go ahead, Jaya.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of stuff in here that I really like, but one thing that I feel, so it's very focused on creating the alternate response task force, facilitating it, all that great work. I'm a little worried that in this process over the years, we've lost sight of someone doing a review of what already exists. So I think that would be my feedback of not just having that happen, then the task force, and I know that's going to impact the scope, and other people haven't even seen it yet. But thinking back to that budget amendment, I think, at least for myself, somewhat what I had imagined would be that somebody else would say, what are other people doing that's working, right? And then I think if the task force is going to be reviewing some of that information, I think that could be helpful, but to just ask the task force to say, here's the call for service data, what do you want to do? I think there's a piece missing. So I think having someone review what's already out there, what's working for maybe similar municipalities that are already implementing alternate options, I think that would be really helpful to come out of this as well. And then the task force can put their hands in it.
Yes, Mary Alice.
Can I ask that we put this on the agenda for January 6th and discuss it at that time?
I definitely think it'll, but I just wanted, if there was any input right now that Will could take, I wanted to have the opportunity to get that out. But yeah, I definitely think it'll be on the next agenda. Grace?
Yeah, I'm in support of taking a little more time. I also can't say I've reviewed it all with a fine-tooth comb to have any specific feedback at this point. So I am fine keeping it. It sounds like that implies that then we're not releasing this January 1st. Sounds like we're okay with that. So yeah, I'm okay with getting some more time, and then also just want to be sure that we do keep it going because we have a lot of people waiting on this and wanting it to move along. And then other question was about the review process, about when that might take place. I mean, I guess after the application period, and who specifically, and if you needed any more information on council volunteers or others on that kind of review task force?
Yeah, the way it's structured in there, which is fairly typical, although I try to condense it for this project, is usually after the deadline closes, we usually give the review team about 2 weeks or 3 weeks to review it. That team meets, goes over the scores, selects who they want to bring in for interview, 2 or so folks, and then usually scheduling, there's usually about a 2-week gap between then and the interview. So that's kind of the timeline there. I think Councilmember Bishop had volunteered to be on the team, and if you were interested, we would take a second council member as well.
Yeah, and to clarify that I'm open to it, but also when Jaya wasn't there originally, or if others want to. But yeah, let me know when those might take place, and I'm open to it.
We can be flexible as, from the times that we have the review meetings and all that, to try to accommodate schedules, because I know everybody's got a lot of stuff going on, and the staff perspective is, I'll try to accommodate everybody, and we'll make the respondents accommodate us from our timeline. So we'll try to be as flexible as we can.
Anything else? Yes, Mayor.
Just related to the emails, you should have gotten a text today with a phone number to call the IT help desk to get the new link. That should get you into your email. So if you didn't check, you got it?
I haven't called you.
Okay, that's what will get you into your email. Okay.
Or email Raphael to send you the link. Thank you, by the way. Okay. Well, we will put that discussion onto the next meeting agenda. The last item on the agenda is council input and communications. Jaya?
Just related to the email, I did want to say thank you to Kate and Linda for helping me navigate getting on after the help desk was closed, and appreciate the text message going out. But it's been a big change, and I appreciate the staff hopping in to help us get back on track.
Anyone else? Grace?
I don't want to steal Mayor's thunder if she was planning to, but if we just clarify, I think our next council meeting, January 6th, and committee of the whole that next following week, and then Tuesday, the 21st, instead of Monday.
I'll just clarify. We're going to have a special council meeting on January 6th, and a rescheduled council meeting on January 6th, and then we will also have a committee of the whole on January 6th.
Okay.
And then we'll be back in our normal groove after that.
James?
Yeah, I just wanted to add my thank you to IT Director Thomas Webb, who had to call me and talk me through getting to my email this afternoon after I was failing to do so. I did appreciate the help.
Okay. With no other business before this body, our meeting is adjourned. Oh, I'm sorry. Mayor, did you have something? Oh. That's what.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry.
Yes, meeting adjourned.